Hey everyone, welcome to Paranormal M. Thank you for joining me again. Before we begin, if you like the stories in this video, please give it a like. And if you have any unexplained paranormal experience of your own, you can send it to me. The first story today comes from someone who grew up in a small city in India. There was one woman in their neighborhood that people always talked about, mostly because of the strange things that happened around her family. The storyteller was scared of her since childhood. So relax, keep listening, and I hope you sleep well tonight. I grew up in a small, Tier 3 city in India, the kind of place people usually forgot about unless they had to pass through it. Before I left for college, that city was my whole world. Our neighborhood was quiet most days, but there was one house nearby that everyone talked about. It belonged to a family from the Mali community, people who traditionally sold flowers for puja. I think there were 6 or 7 people living there when I was younger, but over the years, strange things kept happening in that family. Her husband became paralyzed. Her only son passed away. Later, her daughter-in-law also died. Then her elder brother-in-law and his wife died too. And the strangest part was that none of these deaths were connected in any clear way. They happened at different times, in different places, for different reasons. It was never one accident or one illness that explained everything. Every time something happened, the whole locality would start whispering again. Some people said the family was just terribly unlucky. Others were convinced there was something darker behind it. A few of the cases were even investigated by the police, but nothing suspicious was ever proved. No evidence, no clear answer, nothing. Still, once a rumor settles into a neighborhood, it grows roots. The woman herself scared me a lot as a child. She was short, usually dressed in a dark saree, often black or deep maroon, and she wore a big red bindi right in the middle of her forehead. She chewed pan almost all the time, so her lips were always stained a deep red. During festivals or religious days, she would come to our house to deliver flowers for puja. My mother would call me and say, "Go outside and take the flowers from Kamla, auntie," and I hated doing it. I don't know how to explain it properly, but just standing near her made me uneasy. I used to feel like she already knew I was scared. Whenever I went to collect the flowers, she would look straight into my eyes and smile. Not a normal smile. It was slow, sharp, and silent. She never said anything threatening. She never touched me. But somehow, that smile made my stomach twist. It felt like she enjoyed watching me feel afraid. The neighbors had their own theories. Some openly said she practiced black magic. Some believed she had something to do with the deaths in her own family. Others said people were being cruel and turning tragedy into gossip. And honestly, nobody had any proof. But when you hear the same kind of whispers again and again as a child, they start living inside your head. Still, the rumors were not the only reason I feared her. A few months before she died, I saw something that genuinely shook me. Even now, when I remember that evening, I feel a chill run through my body. That moment deserves its own story, because after that day, I could never look at her the same way again. Hey, I want to share a story with you. Something that happened to me back in April 2021. It's a bit eerie, but also really profound, and I've been carrying it with me ever since. So, picture this. It was nighttime, quiet and still. The kind of night where the world feels a little hushed, wrapped in darkness. I was just drifting off when, suddenly, in my dream, I felt this presence, like someone was hovering right above me in the sky. I couldn't see him. He was invisible, but I just knew it was my friend, someone really close to me. Now, This wasn't like any normal dream. There was this urgency in the air, almost like a desperate plea. He was trying to get through to me, and I could feel it deep inside. He said, clear as day, I was murdered. I've been trying to reach out, but no one else can hear me. You're the only one spiritual enough for me to get through. Can you imagine? Hearing something like that from someone you care about, even if it's just in a dream. At first, I was completely lost. How was I supposed to help? I didn't understand. The confusion was so overwhelming that I woke up, heart pounding, mind racing. It was such a strange, unsettling dream, unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. I was puzzled, honestly, but I pushed it aside and told myself it was just a weird dream. But here's the thing. I had no idea then that my friend had actually passed away. Just a few days later, between 3 and 7 days after the dream, I got the news. He was gone. I tried to find out how, but nobody would tell me. Out of respect, I didn't press anyone. I just waited, hoping maybe one day the truth would come out. Fast forward to yesterday, October 10th, 2022. I finally decided to gently reach out to some people who might know more. I messaged a friend of his on Facebook, someone I didn't know personally but who had posted on his page. I also reached out to a girlfriend of one of his close friends. I asked them if they had any idea how he passed. The response from the guy friend was sobering. Good morning. He went to a desert party and overdosed on bad drugs. They believe foul play was suspected. There was an investigation to figure out what really happened. I tried to find out more, but I had no luck. I moved across the country a few years back, so it was difficult to talk to people face to face. Then, the message from the girlfriend of his good friend was even more intense. It's really intense. He was on psychedelics and slit his throat with a bottle. It happened at a party up in the mountains and everyone was messed up, so by the time he got to the hospital, it was too late. Apparently, it was a shady crowd, but I'm not sure exactly who. Demonic stuff for sure. The drugs turned out to be fake ketamine. Honestly, I sensed the people he was around were dark. Hearing this, it really shook me. It made me believe that what I saw in my dream wasn't just some strange trick of the mind. It felt like my friend truly did visit me, reaching out from beyond, sharing the truth of what happened. I'm getting the sense that foul play was involved, that the party and the drugs were part of something darker. And maybe, just maybe, he came to me right after it happened. Maybe he was scared, desperate to find his way back, to get help in some way. I don't know exactly how the afterlife works, but I want to believe that after he reached out, he found peace, that he went into the light and is in a better place now. This whole experience has honestly made me believe in an afterlife more than ever before. It's hard to explain, but there's something comforting about knowing that maybe, even after death, our spirits can still connect. Have you ever experienced anything like this? Maybe a dream or a feeling that someone you lost was trying to reach you? I'd love to hear your thoughts or stories because this has been such a profound journey for me. Hey, so I want to share something pretty personal with you. Something that's stuck with me for a couple of years now. It all happened on Halloween Day, October 31st, which, is already a day loaded with meaning for a lot of people. But for me, it carries an extra weight. This year actually marks 2 years since it happened. Back in 2016, my granddad, who was more like a dad to me, passed away. He lived in this small, cozy house out here in a quiet little town in the south of Ireland. I had actually lived there with him for a few years before he passed, so it wasn't just his house. It was like a second home to me. When he died, it hit me and my family pretty hard. It was devastating, really. Because of that, we kind of avoided going back to the house for a while. It was too painful, too full of memories. All the laughter, the stories, the moments we shared. It made walking through those rooms feel like stepping into a ghost of the past. Fast forward to Halloween 2 years ago. Our vacuum cleaner at home broke down. Now, buying a new one right away wasn't really an option for us. We're not exactly flush with money. So my mom said she was thinking maybe we could use the vacuum from my granddad's house. I told her, look, I'll go get it, because I didn't want her to have to go through that emotional trip herself. I even asked a close friend of mine, who I'll call Harry, to come with me. Harry's known me since primary school, since 6th class, so about 8 years. He used to come over all the time, knew the house and my family well. We arrived at the house around midday, maybe closer to 2 p.m. The sky was a bit overcast, that typical Irish light that makes everything look kind of soft and a little melancholy. We stepped inside, and honestly, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The house was silent, almost hollow. It was like the walls themselves were holding their breath, missing my granddad's presence. Harry and I wandered through the rooms in this quiet, nostalgic way. Every so often, we'd exchange a memory or a story, little things that brought a brief smile or a flicker of warmth to the day. Eventually, we made our way to the back door and stepped out into the garden. The air smelled earthy, a bit damp from recent rain. The old trampoline sat a little crooked but still there, and the wooden shed where we had spent countless hours playing as kids was still standing. The shed was packed with old stuff from our past. Boxes of forgotten treasures, dusty tools, things that felt frozen in time. After we finished looking around outside, we decided to head back in. As I locked the shed door and then the garden gate behind us, a phone started ringing. It was a sharp, clear ring that echoed a bit in the quiet garden. I didn't think much of it at first. I'd noticed the next-door neighbors had their back door open just a few minutes before, so I assumed it was their phone. But then Harry called my name, and when I turned to look at him, he was standing right by the back door of the house. I was about 5 meters away. He looked at me with this blank, almost stunned expression and said simply, "The phone." I said, "Yeah, it's probably the neighbors." But he shook his head and said, "No, it's inside the house." And then he turned and walked inside, quick and sure. I was confused but followed him. Now the back door opens into this small porch area, maybe a meter square, just enough space to step inside and take off your shoes. From there, you enter the kitchen, which takes up the entire back half of the ground floor. The kitchen connects straight to the sitting room, which is much smaller. When I stepped inside the kitchen, I saw Harry standing next to my granddad's old chair, the one he sat in every day for as long as I can remember. Next to the chair was a small wooden table, and on it sat the landline phone. And it was ringing. We just stared at each other, shocked. The phone line had been disconnected for over 2 years by then. The electricity was turned off in the house, so no lights, no power, nothing. And yet that phone kept ringing. Harry picked up the receiver and said, "Hello?" a few times, but there was no answer. Then he held the phone out to me, and I took it. I tried, "Hello? Is anyone there?" But all I could hear was this faint static, a kind of crackling sound you get from an old wired phone when you pick it up before dialing. No voice, no noise, just static. After a little while, I hung up. Then I picked up again. The same tone, the same faint static, and silence. I kept picking up and putting down the receiver maybe 6 or 7 times. It was so strange. Eventually, I noticed that the phone line wasn't just disconnected. It was unplugged from the wall completely. Harry and I decided to test it out. We tried calling the phone from his mobile, but it didn't ring. Instead, his phone just played that tone you get when you dial a number that isn't valid. We tried again a few times. No luck. Then, we attempted to call both of our mobiles from the house phone. After dialing, neither of our phones rang, and the house phone didn't make any sound to indicate it was dialing or ringing. We sat there for a while, trying to make sense of it all. Then I picked up the receiver again. But the ringing had stopped completely. There was nothing but silence now, no static, no noise whatsoever. I kept picking it up and putting it down, but the ringing never came back. It was so confusing and emotional for me. I've always thought of myself as a bit sensitive, but Harry is a tough guy. Takes a lot to shake him up. And yet, there we were, sitting together in tears, wondering if this was some kind of sign from my granddad or something else entirely. It's been 2 years since that day. I've been back to the house a few times since then, and every time I pick up that phone, there's only dead silence. Just today, I was watching a video on YouTube from a channel called That Chapter. They usually do stories about true crime, murders, and stuff like that. But the video that auto-played was titled 5 True Horrifying Police and EMT Stories. It's not the usual content I watch from them, but it caught my interest, so I left it playing. Around the 18-minute mark, the narrator talks about a strange, somewhat similar phenomenon. It's different from what I experienced, but it made me start thinking again about that day at my granddad's house. I'd really urge you to watch the last minute and a half of that video if you get a chance. You might see what I mean. I'm pretty new to this paranormal stuff, and honestly, I'm just reaching out now because I'm hoping someone out there has experienced something like this, or knows what it might mean. If you or someone you know has had a similar experience or any insight, please, I would really appreciate hearing about it. Thanks for listening. It means a lot just to share this story. Hey, I want to share something pretty incredible that happened to us. Something that really changed the way I see the world. So, my husband, let's call him Aaron. He has this rare gift. He can communicate with the dead, something he inherited from his mom. She was a kind-hearted, skilled witch who passed away when Aaron was just a teenager. Losing her so young was heartbreaking, but she left Aaron with this amazing, mysterious ability. Now, a while back, we took a trip to my hometown, which is a quiet, rural place about a 3-hour drive from where we live now. There's this old cemetery there, just a few miles from my parents' house. It's famous locally for the story of a little girl who died tragically in 1886 at only 2 years old. I won't say her name out of respect, but here's what happened. She and her mom had made some apple butter together, and one night, the little girl sneaked into the kitchen to taste what was left in the pot. The pot was made of lead and had been corroding, poisoning her without anyone knowing. It's such a sad story. The grave is marked by this life-sized statue of the girl, carved from stone, modeled after a portrait taken right before she died. The statue is about 7 feet tall, with her hands folded gently in her lap. What's eerie is that the statue always seems to hold fresh flowers in those hands. No one ever sees who puts them there or takes the old ones away. They're just always there. There's a local tale that if you steal the bouquet at midnight, you can hear the girl crying. I've always been fascinated by ghost stories, but was too scared, and honestly, too sad, to try it myself. Aaron had never been to my hometown before, so when we went, he wanted to visit the cemetery to see if he could connect with the little girl. As we got closer, Aaron said he started hearing a faint voice, a little girl whispering, "My feet hurt. My feet hurt." It was strange because, well, she was only 2 years old. Why would she say that? The voice got clearer as we walked further into the cemetery. When we finally reached her grave, we were stunned, and honestly, a bit shaken. The statue's feet had been vandalized, knocked right off. It was chilling. I remember feeling this cold wave of shock wash over me. It made me realize just how real Aaron's gift is. There have been other moments, sure, but this one, it was unforgettable. Aaron misses his mom every day. I wish I'd known her, because from everything I've seen and felt, a part of her lives on in him. It's like she's still here, but not in the way we usually think. More like a quiet presence, guiding and protecting him. And through him, a little bit of that magic touches my life too. Hey, I want to tell you about this really unsettling experience I had one night when I was staying over at my ex-girlfriend's place. Let's call her Emma for the sake of the story. So it was around 1 a.m. and I was up in her bedroom, working on some music on my laptop. Emma was downstairs, buried in her college coursework. The whole house was deathly quiet, like the kind of silence where every little creak or whisper sounds amplified, and the air feels thick and still. The music I was making felt almost too perfect, too clean for a night like that. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Emma's bedroom door slammed open with a huge bang against the sideboard. The noise echoed through the room like thunder, and honestly, it scared the hell out of me. My heart jumped, and I could almost feel the silence shatter around me. Just as quickly as it swung open, the door began to close, but then I caught it. There was this faint, girlish giggle coming from the corridor outside her room. At first, it was barely audible, just a soft tittering. But as I focused, it got louder and clearer, almost teasing me. I thought, okay, Emma's messing with me, so I decided to play along. I started counting down out loud from 10, telling her that when I opened the door, I was going to come out and tickle her. As I counted down, 10, 9, 8, the giggling turned into full-on laughter, playful but with this eerie edge, almost maniacal. The volume grew, filling the quiet hallway, and with every number I said, the door started to shake like someone was banging against it from the other side. By the time I was at 5, 4, 3, I was creeping closer to the door, heart pounding, a mix of fear and adrenaline pushing me forward. The laughter was almost inviting, like it was daring me to open up and face whatever was there. I reached up, my hand trembling, gripped the door handle, and with everything I had, swung the door open. I leapt through the doorway, planning to land on Emma and give her a good tickle. But the moment my feet hit the floor, the laughter stopped. Just like that, silent, as if someone had flipped a switch. I looked around, but the corridor was empty. No Emma, no prankster, just the cold, empty hallway. I stood there, frozen for a few seconds, trying to make sense of what just happened. Slowly, the unsettling realization crept in. Emma was never there in the first place. I started pacing, peering down the hallway, searching for any sign of her. My heartbeat was pounding in my ears, and I felt like something unseen was trailing me, just out of sight. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see her standing there, grinning. Then I bolted down the stairs and burst into the living room. There she was, sitting hunched over her books, headphones on, completely engrossed in her revision. I yanked the headphones off her, startled her, and asked if she'd been upstairs laughing by her bedroom door. She looked at me, genuinely surprised, and swore she hadn't moved from in front of the TV since she started studying hours ago. I told her everything. The door, the laughter, the prank I thought she was playing, and she didn't even look shocked. That threw me off completely. Then she told me something that chilled me to the bone. Her whole family had experienced encounters with a little girl in the house. This wasn't just a one-time thing. It was something that had been happening for years. Fast forward a couple of months. I was back at Emma's house, this time outside in the garden, just casually petting their cat. Emma nudged me and pointed toward her bedroom window. There, framed against the glass, was the faint silhouette of a little girl standing and watching us. I was stunned. My skin prickled, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. But to Emma and her family, it was just another normal day. Her mom knew I was curious, and a few weeks later, she ended up taking some photos with her phone of Emma's bedroom, apparently to sell the bed. These pictures captured something I can't explain. They showed shadows and shapes that didn't belong there. I have the photos in the order they were taken, and honestly, I'll let them speak for themselves. It's strange how sometimes the scariest moments aren't the loud crashes or obvious ghosts, but the quiet, lingering presence that makes you question everything you thought you knew. That night, with the giggling girl, was one of those moments for me, one I'll never forget. Hey, thanks for sitting with me for a while. I want to share something pretty personal. It's about these moments when I just can't tell if I'm dreaming or awake. It's this strange, foggy space where reality and dreams blur, and it's been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. So, I grew up in a house that was, let's just say, definitely haunted. Nothing super wild all the time, but enough little things that made me question what was really there. And what's weird is, even after moving out, I kept experiencing similar things, like echoes of those old hauntings following me around. About a year ago, I met with a medium. She told me I have the sight, that I can see and interact with spirits, but I'd somehow put a blindfold over myself. Like I'd shut down that part of my perception because of fear. That really made sense to me because there was this whole week in my life where I was scared out of my mind, and it ended with me asking a pastor to bless my house. So yeah, that fear definitely dimmed my abilities for a while. But the thing I want to talk about today is dreams, especially those moments where it's hard to tell if I'm really awake or still dreaming. I've definitely experienced sleep paralysis, and for me, when it happens, I can't open my eyes at all. It's like I'm trapped in my own body. That's the scariest part, honestly, because it makes the world feel unreal and threatening at the same time. Usually these episodes start with me dreaming that I wake up. If I don't have sleep paralysis, I can open my eyes and I'm always in the exact room where I fell asleep, even if I'm visiting someone else's place. That's what makes it so confusing. It's like I'm stuck in a loop where I'm never quite sure if the world around me is real. The first time this happened was back in the haunted house. It was during that terrifying week I mentioned, and I'd wake up feeling like I was outside my body, looking down at myself lying there. My body felt unbelievably heavy, like it was made of lead, and I couldn't move a muscle. I could see the room perfectly, but there was this overwhelming, horrible feeling hanging in the air. I just knew, deep down, that something was trying to possess me. Whenever I realized that, I'd fight so hard to open my eyes. When I finally did, all the bad feelings would vanish. Sometimes I'd wake up like this 3 times in a row before I was really awake. It was exhausting and terrifying. Later, when I learned I could push away negative energy on my own, I spent a night doing just that, and those dreams stopped for a long while. That was a relief. Then, 2 years later, there was another episode, but just once. I was living in a different place then, and I couldn't open my eyes or even move my fingers. But my roommate was right there beside me with the light on, so it didn't feel as scary. And that was the last time sleep paralysis came for me. Years passed, and then came the scariest episode of all. I was at my mom's house, not the haunted one, sleeping in my brother's room. I had to sleep on the trundle bed because the dog had somehow peed on my shopping bag and soaked through the mattress. It didn't smell, but it was definitely wet, so I moved over to the trundle. I remember feeling kind of uneasy, but I went to sleep. In the middle of the night, I woke up to go to the bathroom. When I came back and got into bed, just as I was about to drift off, there was this loud knock on the wall. It startled me so much, I was wide awake. I didn't want to be alone after that, so I got up and went to my sister's room. She has a futon there. Now, here's the weird part. I was definitely dreaming when I lied down there because her room was spotless, and trust me, it never is. I started to fall asleep again, but then something else scared me awake. When I opened my eyes, I was actually awake, back in my brother's room, on the trundle. I have no idea when the dream started or ended. That night, I didn't get any real sleep. That was about a year ago. Now, just last night, I had a new experience in my current home. I woke up and turned over, and I noticed the bedroom door was open, but I was sure I had closed it before going to bed. I felt this chill of fear and tried to calm myself down, thinking maybe my husband had gotten up for water and forgot to close it. I kept glancing at the door because it made me feel uneasy. Eventually, I fell back asleep. But in the morning, the door was closed again. I asked my husband about it, and he said he hadn't gotten up at all. So he thinks I must have dreamed the door was open. And honestly, I don't know what to think anymore. These dreams and moments are so ordinary but just off, like a slight tilt in reality. Has anyone else felt this way? Oh, and one last thing that might be important. A few years ago, when I was dealing with bad anxiety, I was seeing an acupuncturist. She's amazing, way beyond just acupuncture. Early in our session, she said she could feel something attached to me, something blocking my energy. She promised to release it, and that night, I felt so much better. Funny thing is, the client she saw after me came back the next day and told her she'd had her first ever sleep paralysis experience that very night. It's like these energies and experiences are all connected in ways I don't fully understand yet. Thanks for listening to me ramble about all this. Sometimes just putting it into words helps me make sense of it all. You know, sometimes life throws these moments at us that just don't make sense. But somehow, they feel so real, so profoundly real, that they change the way we look at everything. I want to share 2 stories with you. Stories about love, loss, and those moments when the veil between worlds feels thin. Let me take you back to 2015. My dad, let's call him Robert, was going through one of the toughest battles of his life. He was caught in this terrible storm of alcohol withdrawal combined with pneumonia, and it landed him right in the intensive care unit. He slipped into unconsciousness, and I was just 16, trying to come to terms with the fact that I might have to say goodbye to him. Every night, I stayed right there by his bedside, holding on to hope and memories, whispering to myself that he'd pull through. One afternoon, my 2 aunts, Robert's sisters, Sarah and Elaine, came together to visit him. I met them at the hospital entrance and led them quietly through those sterile, echoing halls to his room. But then, something unexplainable happened. As they stepped inside, both of them just froze. They looked at each other with this mix of shock and awe, and tears started rolling down Sarah's cheeks. Elaine was just wide-eyed, speechless. "Do you smell that?" Sarah whispered. "Yes, it's her," Elaine replied, her voice barely above a breath. I was completely puzzled. What were they talking about? I watched them exchange glances that said more than words ever could. I finally asked, "What's going on? What are you guys smelling?" They told me it was the scent of their mother's perfume. This perfume, they explained, wasn't made anymore. It was something they remembered from when they were children, a fragrance tied to so many memories. I thought maybe I was imagining it, or that it was just a nurse nearby. But then, as soon as they acknowledged the smell, it disappeared. Just like that. We were all skeptical, especially Elaine. She's always been the more pragmatic one. She casually moved closer to the nurses on duty, pretending to check for the source of the perfume. But no one was wearing anything like it. There was no logical explanation. The only thing that made sense was that our grandmother's spirit, the woman who had raised them, had come to visit Robert in his final moments. What really got me was how they both stopped at exactly the same time and looked at each other, understanding without a single word being spoken. It wasn't like one pointed it out and the other caught on later. They shared that moment simultaneously. That, to me, is the part that still lingers in my mind and makes me believe. And then there's another story, one that's equally heartbreaking and surreal. This is about my best friend. Let's call her Lily. Our parents met when we were babies, so we grew up like sisters. I came from a rough background, so I spent more time with her family than my own. We knew each other inside and out, our bond unbreakable. We were each other's biggest fans, sharing every secret, every joy, every tear. High school changed things. Our personalities took us in different directions. Our circles didn't overlap as much. Then, when I was 16, Lily moved an hour away. We started talking less, our check-ins becoming few and far between, but the friendship was still there, just quieter. Now here's a small but crucial detail. Lily's mom's hometown was about 4 hours from where she lived now, and 3 hours from mine. One morning, I showed up to class early, something I rarely did. There were only a couple of other girls there, sitting right in front of me. I pulled out my books and tried to focus, but soon I started overhearing their conversation. They were talking about a student who died in a terrible car accident caused by a drunk driver. Then, my heart stopped. They said the name, Lily's name. I could feel my chest tightening, my pulse pounding so hard I thought it might burst right through my skin. It was agony, a pain so sharp it made me want to throw up. I stopped them from going any further, desperate to understand if it was really her. One of the girls described the student, and every detail matched Lily. I was struggling to breathe, the air sucked out of the room. I asked the teacher, who, honestly, seemed to enjoy making my life miserable, to excuse me. For the first time, she showed me a sliver of kindness and let me leave. I called my mom, who rushed to pick me up. At home, I collapsed on the floor of my room, feeling like my mind was fracturing. The pain was unbearable. My chest ached, my head throbbed, and I couldn't stop throwing up. It was like the world had shattered and left me in pieces. Lily, who had left school when she heard the news, found me in that state. She asked if I wanted to go for a ride, something we used to do when we needed peace or just to talk things out. So there we were, 2 broken teenagers in the car, the silence thick and heavy around us. I couldn't hold it together, couldn't even find the words to start explaining what I was feeling. I was helpless. Then I decided to search online, hoping to find some clarity. That's when I learned that Lily's parents were in critical condition in hospitals near their new home. The reality hit me like a punch, and I started throwing up again. We knew we had to see them. They weren't my biological family, but they were the ones who'd raised me, who had loved me through everything. Driving to a city 3 times the size of ours, we didn't realize how many hospitals there were, or about privacy laws that kept us from getting any information. I came home feeling defeated. When I walked through the door, my mom saw the wreckage I'd become and just wrapped me in the warmest hug. I ugly cried, releasing all the pain I'd been holding in. That was my first funeral, my first real encounter with death. I found out the funeral would be in Lily's mom's hometown, 3 hours away from both of us. My friend who had supported me through the worst day of my life, the day Lily died, came with me to the service. The drive there was heavy. The closer we got, the heavier it felt. I kept thinking about Lily's parents. How could I even begin to imagine their pain? They were the kindest people I knew, and now, this. But here's the thing about these stories. Even in the darkest moments, there's a thread of something unexplainable, something that connects us beyond the physical world. Whether it's the scent of a grandmother's perfume filling a hospital room, or the quiet support of a friend during unbearable loss, love leaves its mark in ways we might never fully understand. And that's why I hold on to these memories so tightly, because they remind me that even in goodbye, there can be a visit, a presence, a whisper of love that never truly fades.
Du er velkommen sau.
He said my name, and when I nodded, we shared a quiet moment of condolence. It was comforting, in a way, to connect over our shared loss. My friend stepped forward first, and I took a deep breath, steeling myself to face her immediate family. I couldn't quite understand why the thought of seeing them made my stomach twist into knots. There they were, the mom, dad, and sister, standing so vulnerable and raw in that room. I approached the sister first. The moment our eyes met, she recognized me. When she softly said my name, her face lit up with a warmth that brought tears to my eyes. Her parents heard the exchange and turned toward us, their faces breaking into expressions of relief and gratitude. They embraced me tightly, and in that embrace, I felt a bridge across the painful distance time and tragedy had created. Walking back to the car with my friend, I was utterly drained. I sat there and let the tears fall, each one carrying away a bit of the weight. But soon, even crying felt like too much. The silence that wrapped around us for the next 3 hours was profound, an emptiness we both shared, heavy and quiet. When I finally got to my bed that night, sleep came without dreams, just an empty void where my mind should have been busy. The days that followed were a blur, a haze of numbness and exhaustion. And I want you to remember, my childhood wasn't easy. I grew up in a home shadowed by violence. My dad used to lash out at my mom, right in front of me and my brother. Because of that, I live with PTSD. Nightmares often invade my sleep, stealing peace away. But that night, something was different. I found myself back at school, the hallways packed with noisy students, their chatter filling the air like a relentless tide. I was standing by the stairs when suddenly, she appeared, my best friend. She didn't say a word, but seeing her made my heart swell, and I just hugged her tightly, whispering how much I missed her. She simply smiled, taking it all in silently. And then it hit me like a cold wave. This couldn't be real. She wasn't supposed to be there. Panic pushed me toward the stairs, my mind scrambling to make sense of what was happening. I rushed into a classroom that was unusually crowded, filled with students chatting away. Then she walked in, pulling up a seat right across from me. Suddenly, the bustling noise around us vanished into deafening silence. We just stared at each other, an unspoken conversation hanging in the air. I couldn't take it. I got up and fled through the door. The hallways that had been so full were now eerily empty. But then, I stopped dead in my tracks. How could I run from my best friend? I turned, and there she was, standing right in front of me. It felt like she was speaking to me, not with words, but something deeper, like telepathy. She was telling me it was okay, that I didn't have to be sad, didn't have to be scared, that it was all right. Then she said she had to go and began to walk away. I reached out desperately, wanting to hold her back. "Please don't leave," I begged silently. "I can't do this without you. I'm lost without you." With every step she took, she faded a little more until I was standing there, completely alone. Years later, after I had my daughter, I ended up working for her mom as a personal assistant. One day, we shared our experiences, those strange, heart-wrenching moments that words often fail to capture. Her mom told me that my best friend had come to her too, but in person. Different experience, but the same comforting message. And you know, sometimes in the quiet moments, when the world feels heavy and your heart is aching, those whispers from beyond remind us that love doesn't really die. It lingers, gently guiding us through the darkness. I want to tell you about something I came across from the summer of 1998 during the terrible floods along the Yangtze River in China. That year, the rain just kept coming. Not for a day or two, for weeks. The sky seemed exhausted, but it would not empty itself completely. The river rose higher and higher, spilling over farmland, tearing at embankments, and pushing into villages that had lived beside it for generations. Along the southern bank near Yichang, from Dashi and Huangling Temple toward Nantang, the water climbed so high that people said it looked like the river was trying to enter the rooftops. Homes disappeared halfway into the flood. Shops were shuttered. Boats drifted through streets where children used to walk. At night, the whole place went dim and silent. almost as though the town had been lowered into another world. Then, on the first day of the 6th lunar month, under a heavy sky, a small passenger coach was heading south. Just north of Xianyu Bridge, the road beneath it gave way. People nearby heard the crack first. Then the bus lurched, slid, and dropped straight into the swollen river. The water closed over it almost immediately. No one made it out. A few weeks later, another accident happened. A narrow wooden boat left Nantong with baskets of vegetables and a few passengers, heading across the river toward Liantang. It had not gone far before a huge wave struck it from the side and flipped it over. The boatman disappeared. So did the people with him. For a long time, the flood kept going. The river held everything tightly. It was not until late August that the water finally began to fall back. And slowly, what had been buried started to appear again. Near Huangling Temple, one old house emerged from the flood. Its walls were stained and damaged, but somehow the building was still standing. The owner came back to clean it out. I can only imagine what that must have felt like, opening the door to a home that had been underwater for weeks. But when he stepped into the bedroom, he stopped cold. There were 2 bodies lying on the bed. They were soaked and badly decomposed. The room was filled with the smell of death. The owner ran for help, and the authorities came to investigate. Even though the bodies were swollen from the water, people were still able to recognize them. One was the young woman who had worked as the ticket seller on the passenger coach that sank near Xianyu Bridge. The other was the vegetable trader from the boat that overturned near Nantong. And that is where the story becomes difficult to explain. Those 2 accidents happened in different places. The bus had gone down at one point on the river. The boat had capsized somewhere else. Both victims had vanished into the Yangtze during one of the strongest floods anyone could remember. But the house where they were found was far upstream. So how did their bodies travel against the current, through miles of violent floodwater, and end up together on the same bed inside a stranger's house? Nobody had a real answer. Some people said the flood currents must have been strange that year. Maybe the water twisted back on itself. Maybe debris and pressure carried the bodies in some impossible-looking direction. But others did not believe that. They felt the dead had been brought there. There was an old comment written about the event that stayed with me. It said that great floods are like the anger of heaven. They swallow boats, break homes, and carry off the voices of the living. But water has a path, and the dead have no strength to choose their own way. So if the drowned move against the river and gather in one place, can we really call it chance? I do not know what happened. Maybe it was only the strange mathematics of floodwater. Maybe their bodies were caught in hidden currents no one could see. Or maybe, in a way we are not meant to understand, something guided them there. The Yangtze kept flowing, as it always does. But for a little while, it gave something back. And what it returned left everyone wondering whether the river had simply made a mistake or delivered a message. I'm from southeastern Ohio, not too far from the Kentucky line, and a few mornings ago, I decided to go fishing by myself. Usually, I'd have my younger brother with me, or maybe one of my buddies, but it was early, around 8 in the morning. Everybody was still asleep, and I figured there was no reason to wake anyone up just to go sit by a pond. I'm 20, and I've been to that pond more times than I can count. It's one of those places where you feel like you know every bend in the bank, every shady spot, every little cove where the bass might be hiding. So going alone didn't bother me at all. I got there around 8:40, set up one pole near the entrance for catfish, and then walked the edge of the pond with another rod, casting for bass. It was slow. No bites, nothing moving. Just one of those quiet mornings where time feels like it's dragging its feet. I remember checking my phone around 9:25, just to see how long I'd been there. After that, I moved toward this little cove on the far side of the pond. The ground over there was covered in moss, and the trees leaned out over the water. Honestly, it looked peaceful, beautiful even. Then everything changed. At first, I noticed the birds had gone quiet. There weren't many to begin with, but suddenly there was just nothing. No chirping, no rustling, just stillness. There had been a small plane passing overhead a little earlier, so I tried telling myself maybe that scared them off. But then I got that feeling. You know when your body seems to notice something before your mind does? My skin started crawling. I felt anxious all at once, like somebody was watching me from the tree line. I'm not usually scared of the woods. Animals don't really bother me. People do. So my first thought was that maybe there was a game warden nearby, or maybe somebody else had walked up without me noticing. I even checked my wallet to make sure I had my fishing license on me. Maybe 10 seconds after that, I heard it. A deep growl. And when I say deep, I don't mean a dog. I don't mean a coyote. It sounded bigger than that. Not quite like a lion you'd hear in a video, not that loud or heavy, but close enough that my brain went there immediately. Like a smaller version of that sound, low and rough, coming from behind me. I froze for just a second. Then I reeled in fast. I started making my way back around the pond toward where I'd left my catfish pole. I wasn't exactly panicking yet, but I was definitely done standing in that cove. At the time, I was trying to reason with myself. I thought, maybe there's a tiny chance it's a mountain lion. I know that sounds dramatic, but being that close to Kentucky, my mind went there. And I'll be honest, part of me was doing that dumb thing where you tell yourself, well, if it came at me, I could probably fight it off, which is ridiculous. But in the moment, your brain will hand you some very stupid confidence just to keep you moving. When I got closer to the entrance, I decided to cast one more time. That's the part I keep replaying, because I don't know why I did that. I wasn't comfortable anymore. I knew something felt wrong, but I made one last cast anyway. The second my lure hit the water, back near the spot where I had just been standing, maybe 70 feet away, I heard a sharp crack. It sounded like a thick branch snapping, or something hard being slammed against a tree. Maybe a rock hitting wood. I can't say exactly what it was, but it was loud enough and sudden enough that I didn't try to explain it anymore. I packed up and left. When I got home, I told my parents about it, and they immediately went to Bigfoot. They swear that's what it was. I can't really get myself to believe that, though. I'm not saying people don't see strange things, but Bigfoot just isn't where my mind goes first. Still, I haven't been back to that pond since, and honestly, I don't know if I ever will. I'd rather have a real explanation than sit around assuming it was a cougar, or a mountain lion, or something else that may or may not even be around here. All I know is what I heard, what I felt, and how fast that peaceful little pond stopped feeling peaceful. Hey, I want to share a few things that happened to me when I was a kid. I'm putting them together because we moved around a lot back then, and these memories all come from the same kind of place. When I was younger, there was a lot of violence at home between my parents. Because of that, my mom would sometimes take us to women's refuges. Strange as it might sound, some of my safer, happier childhood memories were in those places. There were other children around, staff who cared, playrooms, shared kitchens, long corridors, staircases, and rooms everywhere. But my mom would often end up going back to my dad, so we never stayed settled for long. I don't remember the exact town where this happened, but I know it was somewhere near the Cleethorpes area in England, because the staff once took all of us kids there for a day out by the sea. The first thing I remember seeing was in one of the hallways. I think I was playing hide and seek, and I must have wandered off on my own. At the bottom of one of the staircases, I saw this dark mist. It wasn't shaped like a person or an animal, It was more like a floating, rounded cloud, but about the size of an adult. I was maybe 20 feet away from it, and the second I saw it, I just froze. That was always how I reacted as a child. I wouldn't scream or run. I'd just stand there, unable to blink, unable to look away, with my eyes starting to sting like I was about to cry. My heart would be hammering, but no sound would come out. I have a memory of seeing that same mist again near a different staircase, though I'm not completely sure if that part is real, or if the first time scared me so badly that my mind kept replaying it in different ways. The second thing happened in the back garden of the refuge. It was a big garden, with enough space for climbing toys, a patio, and a grassy area where we'd play ball games. Two sides were boxed in by the building, and the other sides had tall fencing for privacy and safety. Along the building, there were loads of windows looking out from different rooms. It was evening, after the sun had gone down, but not fully dark yet. I remember being outside alone, which was odd because we had a Kerflex, and the other children had already gone back in. For some reason, I looked up toward the windows, and I saw something floating past them. This one looked more human. It was lighter than the mist, almost pale, like someone wearing a loose cream or faded beige dress. It was high up, maybe 30 feet in the air, drifting slowly from one side to the other. And again, I couldn't move. I just followed it with my eyes until it was gone. The third thing happened in the bedroom I shared with my mom and my siblings. Our window looked over the garden, but because of the way the building was laid out, you could also see part of one of the downstairs hallways from there. It was after curfew, so everyone should have been in their rooms. The hallway light was on, and while I was looking out, I saw feet walking across the floor. Just feet, no legs, no body, nothing above them. They moved like someone was walking normally through the hallway, except there was nobody there. I know it sounds almost ridiculous now, but at the time, I was around 9 years old, and it scared me in that deep, silent way where your whole body goes cold. I come from an Irish traveler background, and there's a belief in my family and culture that some of us can sense things, or that we have a kind of psychic awareness. I don't know exactly what I saw in that refuge, but I know those moments stayed with me. Even now, when I think about that building, I don't just remember the rooms or the garden or the other kids playing. I remember the stairwell, I remember the windows, and I remember those feet walking through a hallway where no one was supposed to be. Here's one of mine. When I was little, I grew up in a small, single-wide trailer, the kind of place where every creak at night felt louder than it should. And almost every night, I would see the shadow of a little boy in my room. Not a clear face or anything like that, just the shape of him, standing there in the dark. I would also hear footsteps moving through the trailer when everyone was supposed to be asleep. Later on, my mom told me something I never really knew how to process. She said my baby brother had passed away at home before he was taken away. The strange part was, he died as an infant, but the shadow I kept seeing never looked like a baby. It looked more like a small child. My dad was always skeptical about things like that. He didn't really believe easily. But one time, the trailer had shifted off part of its foundation, and he had to crawl underneath it to jack it back up. While he was under there, he swore he heard a child's footsteps and then a grown man's footsteps walking from one end of the trailer to the other. Nobody else was inside at the time. That one always stayed with me. I never knew what to make of it. Sometimes I wonder if it really was my brother, just appearing at an age I couldn't understand. Then years later, I was at a friend's house and saw something completely different. This wasn't a shadow. It looked more solid, almost like a real person. It was an older woman coming down the stairs. I remember asking her, "What are you doing?" She just stopped, looked right at me, and then vanished. The next day, I told my friend what I had seen. His mom got quiet and said, "The woman who lived there before them had died in the house after falling down those stairs." That experience was strange, but it didn't scare me the way you might think. She didn't feel threatening. She felt more lost than anything, like maybe she just hadn't moved on yet. But the experience that affected me the most happened in October of 2023. My dad was a double amputee and used a wheelchair, and one night he was having trouble getting into the bathroom. He got stuck, and then his heart rate started climbing. He told my mom and me that he couldn't feel his arms. Then he collapsed forward onto the floor. The EMTs came, but they said he was gone. We found out later it had been a massive heart attack. When he passed, I saw something rise up through the ceiling and disappear. It happened so fast, but I remember the color. It was this strange blue light, unlike anything I had seen before. I've always wondered if that was his soul leaving. After his funeral, things started happening around the house. Objects would fall for no clear reason. One day, I found a penny lying heads up right in the middle of the floor, and the year on it was my mom's birth year. I would smell my dad's cologne in different rooms. At night, I'd sometimes hear low, muffled voices, like someone speaking from far away. Then one evening, I was playing with my cat. It was around 9 at night, sometime in the fall, so it was already dark outside. She started walking toward the kitchen, then suddenly froze. I looked up, and near the closet door, not far from the place where my dad had collapsed, I saw a shadow figure. But this one was different. It looked like my father. Not just a random shape, it had his build, his presence. And what shocked me most was that he had legs. I didn't know how to react. I wasn't scared exactly. I was stunned. All I could say was, "Wow, that's actually kind of cool." My mom was nearby in the living room, but she didn't notice anything. My cat did, though. She had stopped in her tracks and was staring right up at him. So I knew I wasn't the only one sensing something there. Not long after that, I spoke out loud to my dad. I told him it was okay. I told him it was time for him to move on and go wherever he needed to be. And after that, everything stopped. No more things falling, no more voices, no more cologne drifting through the rooms. The house became completely quiet. That moment stayed with me because it really felt like he had come back to say goodbye. Almost like he wanted me to know he was okay, so I wouldn't carry so much sadness. Those are just a few of the experiences I've had, especially with shadow figures. I still don't know what they really are. Loved ones? Something else pretending to be them? Something from another place entirely? I honestly don't know. But I do know how they felt. And with my dad, it felt like love. You know, sometimes the smallest decisions can lead to the most unexpected nights. Like, take that night a while back. I was fighting off insomnia, as usual. It must have been around 2 in the morning when I realized, much to my dismay, that my cupboards were completely bare of snacks. And you know how it is when you're wide awake and craving something crunchy or sweet. It's almost impossible to resist. So, I thought, why not head out to the corner store? It was just a few blocks away, open all night, and I figured a little walk might help pass the time. The air was crisp, a little chilly, but nothing unbearable. I kept my coat unzipped, enjoying the cool night breeze brushing against my face. The streets were completely deserted, silent except for the steady rhythm of my footsteps on the pavement. It felt oddly peaceful, the kind of quiet that only city nights can offer when everyone else is asleep. As I walked, I was scrolling through my phone, clearing out some notifications, when out of the corner of my eye, something caught my attention. At first, I thought it was some sort of doll, maybe discarded between 2 trash bags by the curb. But then, it moved. Curious, I looked closer and realized it was a little girl, alone in the middle of the night. She was wearing a deep maroon dress, and her hair was long, dark, flowing all the way past her waist. She darted over to a closed storefront and peered inside the darkened window. My heart skipped a beat. I couldn't just leave her there, alone and vulnerable at this hour. Without a second thought, I rushed over. She looked about 5 years old, though I'm not great at guessing ages, especially in the dark. "Hey, sweetheart, what are you doing out here? Are you cold?" I asked gently. She pressed her little face against the glass, so I couldn't see her properly until she reached out and took my hand. Then, when she looked up at me, a wave of unease washed over me like a cold splash of water. Her eyes were completely black, no whites, no pupils, just a dark, empty void. For a brief moment, I tried to convince myself they were some kind of colored contact lenses, but that felt silly. No kid that young would be wearing those, especially not in the middle of the night. Then she smiled. And I mean a smile that stretched from ear to ear, wide and unnatural, revealing crooked, sharp teeth that looked like they could tear through flesh in an instant. A thin line of drool glistened at the corner of her mouth. And she was still holding my hand. Panic surged through me, but I knew I had to keep my wits about me. "Are you hungry? I can, buy you some snacks," I stammered, my voice trembling, palms suddenly sweaty. She stared up at me with those dark, unblinking eyes, mouth still spread in that eerie grin. More drool dripped from her lips, and I could almost believe she was about to bite my hand off. Before I could react, she tugged hard, dragging me forward with a strength far beyond what her small frame should have managed. I stumbled along, heart pounding like a drum in my chest, my fingers still entwined with hers. The click of her polished shoes echoed on the sidewalk as we moved toward the corner store. I wasn't going to throw her off or run. That wouldn't end well. So I decided to play along, at least for now. When we reached the store, the harsh buzz of the fluorescent lights was a stark contrast to the quiet night. We both stood there, silent, staring at the entrance, each waiting for the other to make a move. She finally released my hand, and I rubbed my own fingers, aching from her firm grip. Could I call for help inside? Or maybe just hide and hope she wandered off? But then I noticed the drool dripping from her chin. This was my cue to act. Inside, I grabbed a little bit of everything: chocolate bars, chips, some beef jerky. I had no idea what this creature might eat besides people, but hopefully this would buy me some time. The clerk noticed my nervousness but said nothing. Our exchange was brief, almost silent, and I forced myself to take a deep breath before stepping outside again. But the moment I emerged, the girl slammed into my legs so hard I toppled over, scattering my snack bags across the street. She wasted no time scooping up the wrappers and stuffing the food into her mouth, crunching and chewing with a feral hunger. My wrist hit the pavement hard, pain radiating up my arm, but I was frozen, caught between fear and awe. She devoured everything in minutes. When the last crumb was gone, she looked back over her shoulder from a crouched position, and my life flashed before me as she approached. Her small hand clasped my good wrist with surprising force, yanking me to my feet and nearly dislocating my arm. Sweat beaded on my forehead as she pulled me away from the store. Both my arms burned with pain, and her free hand pointed off into the darkness. That's when it hit me. She wanted to play. "Do you want to play in the park?" I asked hesitantly. She let out a shriek, not quite a laugh, not quite a scream. It was impossible to tell whether it was joy or a warning. The park was just a short walk away. I'd never ventured there myself, but I knew it was on the way home from work. Figuring she wasn't going to eat me just yet, I followed her. When we arrived, she shrieked again and darted toward the slides, kicking off her shoes and leaving them behind. I could have taken that chance to leave, but judging by how fast she moved on all fours, I knew she could catch me in an instant. She grew bored of the slide quickly, launching herself down the plastic tube with reckless abandon, slamming into the wood chips below. Each thud made me flinch, but she seemed unfazed, brushing herself off and moving on to the swings. How did I end up babysitting a supernatural creature in the middle of the night? I wondered, watching her try to figure out the swings. The park was empty. Parents had kept their kids away ever since the local animals started turning up torn apart. Squirrels, birds, all victims of some unknown predator. Even a homeless man who used to hang around the area had disappeared recently, leaving behind blood and shredded clothes. It was enough to keep anyone away. My gaze snapped back to the girl, piecing everything together. The missing man, the dead animals, and now her presence. It couldn't be coincidence. Just as I prepared to run, she sat down, gathering wood chips into a pile, then waved at something invisible to me. She leapt onto the climbing frame, her movements sharp and deliberate, occasionally pausing to interact with unseen playmates. It was like the park was full of children, and she was playing along. I thought maybe she was seeing ghosts, but the thought chilled me too much, so I pushed it aside. Maybe she was just mimicking other kids' behavior. Suddenly, a sharp slap on my leg yanked me back to reality. She had hit me hard enough to sting, then darted away, glancing back anxiously. When I stood frozen, she returned, slapping me again, even harder this time. My pulse quickened. Was this her version of tag? Play or be eaten? I chose play, but it wasn't a fair game. She cheated, racing on all fours, a blur of motion darting through the wet grass. I was out of breath almost immediately. Before I could catch my breath, she spotted something in the bushes near the park entrance. Her eyes widened, mouth opening impossibly wide, and she disappeared into the shadows. What followed were screams, blood-curdling and inhuman. I couldn't tell if it was her or some unfortunate creature she found. Frozen in place, I watched as she emerged, face dripping with blood, dress torn, feet muddy. She met my gaze and coughed up a clump of bloodied fur. Nightmares were inevitable after that. She settled beside me silently, staring up at the sky, toes wiggling. Then, breaking her trance, she smiled, this time less menacing, and waved at me a few times before looking back up. Did that mean she was done with me? Testing my luck, I took a few steps away, nearly making it out unscathed. Then, foolishly, I said, "If you're ever around, you can come see me anytime." Why I said that, I'll never know. She smiled and waved again. That was my cue to leave. Back home took only minutes. I kicked off my shoes and collapsed into bed, mind racing, unable to sleep. No one would believe my story, so I kept it to myself. Nearly a week later, I fell asleep before dawn, a rare occurrence. When morning light filtered through the windows, I woke groggy, needing the bathroom. That's when I noticed the door was open. I never left it that way. Then, at the foot of my bed, there was a lump beneath the blankets. I told myself it was a stray cat, but the shape was too big. I pulled back the covers. There she was, the same girl, curled up like a cat, with a dead bird lying beside her, its neck twisted unnaturally. I begged myself to believe it was a dream, but it wasn't. Half asleep, she nudged the bird toward me as if offering a gift. "No, thanks. You keep it," I said, voice trembling. Without hesitation, she snapped the bird up in one bite. The crunch of bones echoed through the room, making me curl tighter, heart pounding. Her head fell back to the mattress, and I thought she might finally be asleep. I bolted to the bathroom and locked the door. I could have called the police. I could have done anything, really. But somehow, I let her stay. 2 days have passed since she arrived. Besides the occasional bird, she eats normal food. She lounges on the couch watching cartoons or nests in blankets on my bed. I managed to bathe her and clean her dress as best as I could, but I'll need to get her some new clothes soon. Every time she crushes a bird's brittle bones, a chill runs down my spine. I know if I upset her, I could be next. She might stay for a while or disappear tomorrow. Monsters are unpredictable. And yes, I made another mistake. I gave her a name. This creature who's been decimating the local birds and threatening my life will now only answer to sweetheart. Hey there. I want to share some pretty strange experiences I've had over the years. Things that are really hard to explain. But since having my little boy and seeing how he's reacted to some of these events, I feel like I need to reach out. Maybe someone else has felt or seen the same things, or can at least understand what I'm going through. You know, ever since I was a kid, I've had this unusual ability to see and sense things others don't. I remember having these incredibly vivid dreams that later came true, hearing voices, and sometimes even seeing things. What's wild is that sometimes my friends or family would witness the same things, and only then would they start believing me. Those dreams? They were always unsettling, mostly involving this creature that could shapeshift and terrified me. It never had eyes. As a kid, I used to call them abyss eyes, because it felt like staring into a bottomless void. This creature would show up in my dreams as a cat or a lizard, always during really traumatic moments. And it wasn't silent. It spoke to me, though I could never fully understand what it said. Recently, I was chatting with a close friend about someone he knows who can sense and see things too. He mentioned this creepy kid, a kid who's been terrified of nightmares and seeing things no one else could. One night, the friend saw this strange being perched on the creepy kid's shoulders, hunched over, with a long nose and no eyes at all. I was stunned. I hadn't shared my dreams with anyone, and hearing about this being, it was like my own nightmare was out there, real for someone else. And that's just one part of what I've been dealing with. There's this whole family story about a shadow creature we call the black cat. But it's not really a cat. It's this tall, sleek, shadowy figure that moves fast and silently. My great-grandmother told me once, she's a very religious and skeptical woman, that this thing chased her and her son through the woods years ago. Creepy, right? I've seen it slinking around the house when I was a kid, sometimes whispering to me, though I could never make out the words. Friends have seen it too, and they were genuinely freaked out. It's like this presence is part of my family's story, woven into the background of our lives. Not too long ago, I was given a set of tarot cards. Turns out, I'm surprisingly good at reading them. Every reading I've done has been spot on. But since I started using the cards, everything has gotten more intense. I wake up in the middle of the night hearing voices, seeing shadows shifting around the room. Even my son has noticed. He's scared to sleep alone now. Just the other night, I woke up to something standing right over me. It was terrifying beyond words. There's so much more to tell, but I wanted to share that first part. If anyone out there has had similar experiences or can offer insight, I'd love to hear from you. Now, I want to tell you about another experience that still haunts me, the story of the Black Horseman. Growing up, I had my fair share of little paranormal events. I was always skeptical, so when weird things happened, I tried to rationalize them. But some things were just too real to ignore, and often they happened in front of others, so I knew I wasn't imagining things. As a teenager, I got curious about the paranormal. I wasn't scared anymore. I was cocky, actually. I started talking about spirits, trying to communicate with presences I couldn't see, and it felt like I was stirring something up. This story is the scariest thing I've ever experienced. I had this friend. Let's call him Nate. Sometimes, while we were chatting, he'd suddenly zone out, say some eerie nonsense that didn't make sense, then snap back as if nothing happened. acting like he had no memory of what he said. Usually, it ended there. But one time, when we were about 15, he went into one of these trances on the phone and said to me, "Follow the tracks to your right. Then on your right again near the end, you'll come to their resting place." It was cryptic, but something in his voice made me listen. Let me explain. I lived in this trailer park on the edge of a small town, surrounded by thick woods. The main road dead-ended at the back of the park, and beyond that was a steep embankment leading down to an old railroad track that barely ever saw a train. To the right, the tracks ended in woods. On one side was an abandoned old mill. On the other side, dense forest behind a neighborhood. So, I went out late that summer afternoon and followed the tracks to the right, heading toward the end. Suddenly, I heard footsteps crunching through the leaves in the woods on my right. Curiosity got the better of me, so I climbed up the embankment and moved toward the noise. No one was there, but I found something unexpected. A small, tucked-away graveyard hidden behind the neighborhood. It looked like a family plot, with weathered headstones dating from the early 1700s to the early 1900s, only about 20 markers. I was fascinated and later brought Nate there. He was visibly unsettled, but insisted he'd never seen it before. I believed him because he wasn't the type to lie. The graveyard became my secret spot. I'd go there at night, feeling fearless, even though nothing particularly weird ever happened. Then, on another day, Nate zoned out again in the middle of our conversation. This time he said, "Head to the tracks, cross them, and when you enter the woods, you will see him." I was feeling bold, so I followed his directions again, late afternoon. I crossed the tracks into a clearing with an old mill on the left and a long stretch of power lines cutting through the woods on the right. Straight ahead was thick forest. I moved toward the tree line, and the moment I stepped in, I heard the sharp snap of branches. My heart jumped. Then, out of nowhere, I saw a shadow. A man dressed entirely in black, riding a black horse. He galloped through the woods ahead of me, moving fast and silently, disappearing into the trees to my left. It was shocking. Horses weren't common around my town. But I was too curious, and maybe a bit reckless, so I followed the direction he came from, moving along the edge of the tree line beneath the power lines. There, I found a collapsed old horse stable, completely isolated. I called Nate the next day, told him what I'd seen, and brought him along to prove it. And you won't believe this. As we entered the woods where I had seen the horseman the day before, we both saw him again, taking the same path. It was broad daylight, clear as day. There was no way we both imagined it. We were both shaken but kept going, and I showed him the stable. The strangest part? I brought a few other friends there later, and each time, the black horseman appeared to us. These experiences have stayed with me, shaping how I see the world. I'm sharing this because I believe that sometimes, when we open up about these strange moments, we might find others who understand, and maybe even find some answers together. Hey, I want to tell you about this really strange experience I had out here in Oklahoma. See, where I'm from, there's this old Catholic church that's kind of infamous around these parts. It's out in the middle of nowhere, like 30 minutes from the nearest town, and honestly, that town hardly even shows up on maps. The church itself is huge and kind of grand, with these beautiful stained glass windows and crosses everywhere. But here's the weird part. Nobody really goes there. Only priests and monks seem to live there, and from what I can tell, outsiders aren't exactly welcome. There's also this big cemetery right next to it, fenced in by this black metal gate that looks like it's been there for ages. So, it was Friday, September 23rd, just past 11 p.m. Me and 3 of my friends thought it would be a cool idea to check out the cemetery, because, it was late, spooky season, and we were looking for a little adventure. We wandered around, looking at the gravestones in these old mausoleums from way back in the 1910s. It was eerie but fascinating. Then one of my friends noticed this kind of hidden path. It was barely noticeable, just overgrown grass and some debris covering the entrance. Curious as we were, we decided to follow it. We walked for almost a mile, deeper into the woods, and eventually, the path opened up into a clearing. And guess what? We stumbled upon another cemetery. This one seemed even older, and what really struck me was how odd it was to find a cemetery out here with no roads or clear trails leading to it. It felt like it was forgotten, or maybe even deliberately hidden. We didn't want to stop there though. To the right of this second graveyard, we found another path through the woods and took it. Not even half a mile in, I started hearing something strange. Drums, low and heavy, like those deep bum 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 beats you'd expect in some ritual. It was rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Once I mentioned it, everyone else heard it too, and we all agreed it was insanely weird given how far out we were. Then, through the trees, we saw glowing lights flickering. At that moment I just said, "Screw this," and told everyone we should get out of there. I might have run a little, I'm not proud of it, but I was definitely scared. Fast forward to Saturday, October 1st, around 1 a.m. My friends convinced me to go back with them. We thought about bringing weapons, but decided against it. Maybe that wasn't the smartest choice. As we approached, we noticed fresh footprints all over the trail from the second cemetery to the spot where we had fled before. That was seriously creepy. It felt like someone, or something, had been there recently. When we reached the place where we'd seen the lights before, everything was quiet. No sounds, no people, no glowing lights, just silence and two buildings sitting there in the dark. The first building was this small stone structure that looked like some kind of temple. It wasn't very big, just a single story or so. The door was wooden and had this heavy padlock on it, but written across the door was a word in some language none of us recognized. One of my friends kicked the door a few times, and eventually, it creaked open and split from its hinges. Inside, there was this 8-foot by 8-foot pentagram painted on the floor, just like something out of a horror movie. Around the pentagram were candle holders positioned exactly where you'd see them in scary films, but the candles weren't lit. The walls were covered in strange, random words, and there were tiny figurines of animals scattered around. At the back of the room, on a small altar, sat a little statue, maybe a foot tall, that looked like some kind of satanic idol. We climbed up to the second floor, which was just two tiny rooms stacked one over the other. It looked lived in a way. There were cups, plates, lighters, a bottle of red nail polish, and some jars filled with crystals, salts, and strange liquids. But what really sent chills down my spine was seeing a cowl with a hood, the kind monks wear, just resting there like someone had taken it off and left. The second building was a little bigger, kind of like an old house from the 1890s, but completely empty inside. It had 2 stories, a swept floor, windows that were closed and unbroken, and a door that still functioned smoothly. There was an attic too, but we couldn't get inside. It was just out of reach, adding to the mystery. After we checked everything out, we left quickly. The whole experience still haunts me. I keep thinking about those drums and the strange temple, and I wonder, what exactly is going on out there? Is it some cult? A secret society? Or just old stories coming alive in the night? Anyway, I'd love to hear what you think about all this, because honestly, it's been hard to shake off that feeling I got standing there in those woods, surrounded by silence and shadows. I've had a few experiences in my life that I still don't really know how to explain. I'm not saying they were supernatural, and I'm not trying to make them sound bigger than they were. They just stayed with me, and every now and then I find myself thinking back on them and wondering what was really happening. The first one happened when I was a kid, probably around 7 years old. I was at the beach, playing close to the shoreline, not really paying attention to how strong the water was. Then this wave came in much harder than I expected and knocked me completely off my feet. I remember being pulled under and rolled around in the water. My first thought was something like, I can't stop this. I'm just being carried. And then, for just a moment, it felt like I wasn't inside my body anymore. I could see myself from outside myself, almost like I was watching from a few feet away, seeing this small kid tumbling around in the wave. It only lasted a couple of seconds. Then the wave pushed me back toward the sand. I was fine, and suddenly I was back in my body again. I've wondered about that for years. Maybe it was just fear. Maybe it was my brain trying to protect me from panic. I don't know. But the memory is so clear that it never really faded. The second thing happened years later when I was in high school. I took a nap one afternoon, and I had this dream that interrupted whatever else I had been dreaming about. It felt almost like a radio signal cutting through static. Suddenly, I saw one of my old pet fish, a fish I'd had for a long time, swimming in a circle. I was looking down at it from above. After it completed one circle, it kept swimming, but now there was a tiny fish beside it, almost like a little copy. They swam together in the same pattern, and then I woke up. I remember feeling strange right away, so I went downstairs to check the aquarium. At first, I noticed all these tiny dark specks floating around. I got closer and thought they looked almost like tadpoles. For a second, I genuinely wondered if somehow a frog had gotten into the tank and laid eggs. Then I noticed one of my newer fish resting against a plant, breathing heavily and looking thinner than usual. The funny thing is, the day before that, I had actually decided I was probably going to return that fish. It had been chasing the others during feeding time, and I thought it was just being aggressive. I had also noticed it getting bigger, but I assumed I had been feeding the tank too much. Pregnancy never even crossed my mind, mostly because I had tried to breed fish before when I was younger, and nothing ever came of it. But those little tadpoles were baby fish. Looking back, maybe the dream was just a coincidence. Maybe my mind had picked up on details I hadn't consciously understood yet. But the timing of it felt so odd, and the image of the fish swimming with the smaller one has always stayed with me. The third experience was more recent. I had an important practical exam coming up, and I was originally assigned to one examiner. About a month before the exam, though, I had a dream that I was taking it with someone completely different. An examiner named Mr. Calden. I had only met him briefly before, and from what I'd heard, he had a reputation for being pretty tough. But in the dream, he wasn't intimidating at all. He was relaxed, smiling, laughing a little, and guiding the oral part of the exam in a calm way. When I woke up, I remember thinking, that was interesting. I'm actually glad I don't have him though, because everyone says he's intense. Then, about a month later, my original exam got canceled because of scheduling changes. When they reassigned me, it was to Mr. Calden, the exact examiner from my dream. What really caught me off guard wasn't only that I ended up with him, it was that he acted almost exactly the way he had in the dream. I had expected someone serious and intimidating, especially because people had warned me that he liked to go deep into scenario-based questions. But during the exam, he smiled, laughed, and came across as surprisingly warm and easygoing. I don't claim to be psychic or a medium or anything like that. These could all be coincidences. They could be selective memory. They could be my brain noticing things quietly in the background before I understood them consciously. But I also can't pretend they didn't feel meaningful. So I guess I'm curious. Have you ever had a dream that later seemed connected to something real? Or a brief out-of-body experience? Or just one of those moments that doesn't fit neatly into any explanation, but stays with you anyway? I'd really appreciate hearing how other people make sense of experiences like this. I don't really know who else to tell this to, so I'm just going to say it as plainly as I can. Yesterday, something happened to me in the woods behind my house, and I still can't make it fit inside any normal explanation. I keep turning it over in my head, trying to find the sensible part, the loose thread I can pull until the whole thing unravels into something ordinary. But there isn't one. Those woods are not unfamiliar to me. I've cut through them plenty of times to get to the little service station near the main road. It usually takes about 12 minutes, maybe less if I walk fast. Nothing about it has ever felt strange before. But yesterday, I had only been in there for a couple of minutes when I heard music. At first, it was just a heavy thudding sound, like a kick drum echoing through the trees. Then I heard a guitar over it, rough and sharp, and after a moment, faint vocals underneath. I stopped walking and listened. I didn't recognize the song. I still don't. I probably should have kept going, but curiosity got the better of me. It sounded close, like there was some small live show happening somewhere in the woods, which made no sense. There had never been music out there before. No gatherings, no events, nothing. So I followed it. The closer I got, the clearer it became. More drums, a bass line, something like a keyboard. The vocals were louder too, though I still couldn't make out the words. And then, suddenly, I saw the clearing. That's the first thing that bothers me. I know those woods. I really do. And I had never seen that clearing before. It was a round patch of grass, almost perfectly circular, surrounded by trees like they had grown there on purpose to hide it. In the middle of it stood a band. There were 12 of them all together. At first glance, they looked almost normal. They were all dressed in matching dark suits, the kind a band might wear if they were trying to look old-fashioned and sharp. But they were all bald, and each of them wore the same flat cap pulled low on their head. The most noticeable one was a woman standing at the front. She wasn't singing. She was dancing. And I don't know how to explain this properly, but her dancing was wrong. She could move. It wasn't clumsy. It was just inconsistent, like her body kept changing its mind halfway through every motion. One second she was swaying, the next she was jerking her shoulders, then spinning too slowly, then stepping in a rhythm that didn't match the song at all. The music itself had this hard rock sound, loud and gritty, almost like an old AC/DC track, but not one I knew. I was standing higher up from them, near this raised part of the woods where the ground drops suddenly. It's not exactly a cliff, but it feels like one when you're standing at the edge. There was maybe a 15-foot drop between me and them, and they were far enough away that I didn't think they had noticed me. So I watched. Aside from the dancer, there was a lead singer, a backing singer, 2 guitarists, a bassist, a drummer, someone playing a small synthesizer, another person at what looked like a DJ table, one man standing beside a metal keg hanging from a branch with rope, and another man holding a big red button in both hands. That part looked almost ridiculous at first, like a prop, like something from a meme. A huge red button just sitting there in his hands. I watched for maybe a minute. The strangest part is that they were actually good. The song had a hook, and I remember one line from the chorus. "You were never mine to keep." Then the man with the button pressed it. The sound that came out was unbearable. It was like a microwave beep stretched into one long scream, except 20 times louder, piercing straight through my skull. I clapped my hands over my ears and cried out before I could stop myself. It hurt. It physically hurt. Then it stopped. And when I looked back down at the clearing, All 12 of them were staring at me. No music, no movement, no blinking that I could see, just staring. That was when I noticed their faces. None of them had mouths. They had eyes, they had noses, but where their mouths should have been, there was only smooth skin, flat and sealed over, like they had never been born with that part of the face at all. I reached for my phone. I thought if I could take a picture, at least I'd have proof. At least I wouldn't have to sound insane when I tried to explain it. But the moment I looked down to open the camera, something changed. When I looked back up, they were no longer in the clearing. They were directly below me. All 12 of them stood at the base of the drop, looking straight up at me. They hadn't climbed. They hadn't run. Their bodies still had that same frozen posture, like statues that had simply been placed closer when I wasn't looking. The only thing left in the clearing was the metal keg, still hanging from the tree. I remember looking at the drummer most clearly. I don't know why him. Maybe because his eyes were wider than the others. Maybe because he looked angry. Not annoyed, not curious, angry, like he hated me for seeing them. My mouth went dry, and my legs felt heavy in that awful way they do right before panic takes over. Then something in me snapped loose, and I ran. I ran back through the woods as fast as I could. I fell twice. I scraped my palms. I looked back more than once, but I never saw them following me. That didn't make me feel better. I got home, locked the door, and I haven't gone near those woods since. I still haven't told anyone in person. How would I even start? I saw a band in the woods. Sounds harmless until I explain the mouthless faces, the button, the way they moved without moving, the woman dancing like something was pulling invisible strings through her bones. And honestly, that isn't even the worst part. The worst part started last night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them again. Not in a memory, not in a dream. It was like closing my eyes opened another set of eyes somewhere else. I was back in those woods, floating at the edge of the clearing, watching them play pieces of songs I had never heard before. Songs I'm not sure exist anywhere. I could see everything clearly. The suits, the caps, the woman dancing, the drummer, the man with the red button. I didn't sleep at all. I kept thinking, what happens if he presses it again while my eyes are closed? What if that sound starts and never stops? Tonight, it happened again. The third time I closed my eyes and saw them, I couldn't take it anymore. I spoke out loud from my bedroom. I know how that sounds, but I was desperate. I said, "Please leave me alone. What do you want from me?" The band stopped playing. All of them turned toward me. Then the singer answered. His mouthless face didn't move. Nothing moved. But I heard him as clearly as if he were standing beside my bed. He said, "We are you. We are all of you. We are every thought you buried, every feeling you swallowed, every face you learned to wear. We are everyone." Then they went silent again. I don't think I was supposed to see them. I don't know what I did wrong. I don't know if they're ghosts or something worse, or something that doesn't have a name. All I know is that I'm afraid to close my eyes, and I'm afraid that when I finally do, they'll still be waiting. Let me tell you about one of the stranger spirits whispered about in Thai folklore. It is not the kind of ghost that floats through a doorway in white cloth or cries beside a lonely road. No, this one is quieter than that. Smaller, easier to overlook. People call it Phi Ja Klai. In some southern villages, older folks have another name for it, Phi Luan. And what makes this spirit so unsettling is that, at first glance, you might not think it is a spirit at all. You might only see a cat. Just a cat. Maybe it is sitting near the edge of the yard after sunset. Maybe it slips across the path in front of you without making a sound. Maybe it watches from beneath an old wooden house where the shadows are thick and the earth smells damp. But the stories say that if you look closely, you will know something is wrong. Its fur is black, but not the soft, shining black of a healthy animal. It is dull and rough, almost lifeless. Some say the fur grows the wrong way, pointing forward toward the head instead of back toward the tail, making the creature look swollen and unnatural. And then there are the eyes. The old storytellers describe them as deep red, glowing faintly in the dark, like fresh blood caught in moonlight. The Jaki is said to move with frightening speed. It prowls mostly at night, and during the day it hides underground, in holes, burrows, or hollow spaces beneath the soil. If someone spots it while the sun is still up, it will not stay to be stared at. It bolts away and vanishes into the earth before anyone can get close. People believe this ghost cat hated humans. Some traditions say it was not born naturally at all, but created through dark magic. A sorcerer, someone skilled in curses and hidden rituals, could make such a creature and keep it as a servant. When the sorcerer wanted revenge, the ghost cat would be sent out in the night. And once it found its victim, the trouble could begin. Illness, madness, sudden weakness, even death, if the stories are to be believed. But there is another version too. In that telling, the Jaki begins as an ordinary cat. Then, little by little, something changes inside it. It develops a hunger for raw flesh and blood. That hunger draws wicked spirits near, spirits known in Thai belief as prai. And once those spirits enter the animal, the cat is no longer only a cat. It becomes something cursed. What makes this legend especially interesting is that the Jaki was not only spoken about in village stories. There are old references to beings called Jaki in ancient Siamese law, including records from the Three Seals law of the early Rattanakosin period. One strange legal idea said that if a person being accused in court could prove the accuser was one of these supernatural beings, the case could be dismissed. Now, whether people took that literally or symbolically, it tells us something important. Belief in these spirits was not just entertainment. It lived inside the way people understood danger, justice, illness, and fear. The Jaki is sometimes compared to Japan's nekomata, another supernatural cat from folklore. But the Thai ghost cat feels darker in a different way. It does not need to transform into a person. It does not need to speak. It remains in the shape of a cat, and that is what makes it so disturbing. Because cats are familiar to us. They sleep beside our homes. They wander through kitchens. They curl up in doorways and stare at things we cannot see. And maybe that is why this legend lasts. The fear is not only that a monster might come from the forest, it is that something ordinary, something we trust, might be hiding a curse beneath its skin. Today, fewer people truly believe in the Jaki the way they once did, but the name still appears in folklore collections and ghost stories, lingering like a scratch on an old wooden door. And somewhere, in a quiet village after midnight, when a black cat slips under the floorboards and its eyes catch the light just wrong, someone may still remember the warning. Do not follow it. Do not touch it. And whatever you do not let it know you are afraid. I'd had a little to drink that night. Not enough to be completely gone or anything, just enough to feel loose and tired. I was watching YouTube, and I ended up on one of those videos about disturbing documentaries. One of the documentaries they talked about was about sleep paralysis. Now, I don't have some long history with sleep paralysis, but when I was younger, I did see things sometimes. Shadows, people, animals, things that no one else ever saw. So I'm willing to admit that maybe it was just a kid's imagination. or that thing where you think you saw something and your brain fills in the rest. But there are a few things I still can't explain. A few years ago, I moved into a 3-bedroom townhouse. I moved out almost a year ago, but not because of what happened there. Honestly, it was because the rent got ridiculous. The layout was a little strange. There was 1 bedroom downstairs, along with the living room, kitchen, and a bathroom. Then there were 2 bedrooms upstairs and another bathroom. I stayed in the downstairs bedroom. The first month was normal. Just moving in, unpacking, getting my room set up. My roommates lived upstairs with their little boy, and his room was right above mine, so there was a lot of running and jumping. Because of that, I slept with a small fan on for noise. I still sleep with one now. Then one night, I woke up with this strong feeling that someone was in my room. My eyes immediately started filling with tears, but it wasn't like I was crying. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel like I was about to break down. My eyes were just watering like my body knew something before I did. Then I felt hair brushing against my upper back. I sleep without clothes, so my back was uncovered. I tried to move, but I couldn't. Not even a little. I pushed with everything I had, but my body wouldn't listen. And then I saw hair in front of me. My room wasn't pitch black because there was a street light outside that gave the whole space this dim glow. I usually liked that. But that night, it let me see just enough. It looked like someone with long hair was leaning over me. I remember breathing carefully, staring at those strands of hair hanging into my view. I don't know how long it lasted. It felt like forever, but realistically it was probably only a minute or two. Then, suddenly, it was gone. I could move again. I jumped up and turned on every light in the room. I checked the closet. I checked the corners. I even lifted up my king-size bed to see if somehow someone was under it. Of course, there was nothing there. I left the lights on, turned on the TV, and put on some dubbed Korean drama on Netflix because I didn't have my contacts in and couldn't read subtitles. Eventually, I fell back asleep. The next morning, I told myself it was stress. Too many horror movies. Too much imagination. Just my brain acting weird. A couple weeks later, my friend Lacey stayed over. I woke up in the middle of the night because I thought I heard her getting up to use the bathroom. But when I opened my eyes, she was still asleep beside me. She had been drinking a bit that night, but I hadn't. Her back was turned to me, and she was completely out. Then my eyes started watering again. That same strange feeling came over me. Not fear exactly, but something close to it. Something cold and warning. This time, it felt like I was being pressed down. Not held exactly. More like there was a weight on me, pinning me in place so I couldn't move. When I was a kid, certain ghost stories would make my eyes water for no reason. I never understood it. This felt exactly like that. Then I felt breathing. Right against me. And again, I saw the hair. Long hair. Not jet black, but definitely dark. Not blonde, not white. Just this curtain of hair hanging near my face like someone was bending over me. It lasted long enough for me to feel trapped inside my own body. Then it stopped. The second I could move, I turned on the light and checked the room again. Nothing. Lacey barely stirred. A few minutes later, she woke up groggily and went to the bathroom, like nothing in the world had happened. Again, I tried to explain it away. Bad sleep. A weird dream. Imagination with its little claws in the dark. A couple days later, I was talking with my roommates, and I joked that the townhouse was haunted. One of them went quiet. Then she looked at me and asked, "Did you see the woman?" I swear every part of me tightened up. I asked her what she meant, and she said she thought she had seen a woman a few times near the stairs. Like someone walking down from upstairs, except no one was there. I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. I told her, "Maybe it's the woman living in the attic." That was the wrong joke to make, because after that, she insisted on putting locks on the attic door. The strange part is, after those locks went on, I never had another visit. We all moved out about a year ago. Like I said, it was really because the rent got too high and my roommates wanted a place with a backyard. But all of us agreed on one thing before we left. Sometimes, out of nowhere, you could smell freshly smoked cigarettes in that townhouse. None of us smoked. Nothing like that has happened in my new place. But I'll be honest with you. While I'm telling this story, my eyes are starting to water again. I'm not going to use any specific religious words here. So for places people usually call a church, mosque, temple, or shrine, I'll just call them God's home. You know, as humans, we often ask God for something. Whenever we pass by God's home, we lower our heads, whisper a prayer, and ask for a blessing, a wish, or sometimes even a miracle. There was once a family of 4 who had struggled with poverty for many years. They had a small roof over their heads, but most days, even putting food on the table was difficult. The mother sold vegetables in the market, and the father worked at construction sites whenever someone hired him. They had 2 daughters, sweet and bright girls, but in many parts of Asia, people still believe a family is not complete without a son. And that thought lived inside this family, like a shadow. Even though they could barely afford school supplies for their daughters, they kept wishing for a son. They prayed again and again. They offered small things at God's home, almost like they were trying to bargain with God. But nothing changed. Then one day, a distant relative passed away and left them a piece of land in his will. The family sold that land, and with the money, they slowly improved their life. They started eating better. The girls had proper clothes and school things. For the first time in years, the house felt lighter. But as their money grew, their promises to God grew too. It became a habit. Whenever they passed God's home, they asked for a son. They even taught their daughters to pray for a baby brother. If they traveled to another town and saw another God's home, they would stop and make the same wish again. Sometimes they promised donations. Sometimes they promised offerings. They didn't really understand what they were doing or how many promises they were making. After some time, the wife became pregnant. This time they visited even more God's homes. Their prayers became stronger, their promises bigger. And then, the child was born. It was a boy. They named him Ariv. The family was overjoyed. They felt like their biggest wish had finally come true. They donated at some of the places they remembered, trying to keep their promises. But soon, something began to feel wrong. Ariv was always sick. Not just once in a while, almost all the time. Some weeks he would get better, then suddenly fall ill again. They took him to doctors. They did tests. They bought medicines. But every report looked normal, and still, the boy kept suffering. 2 or 3 years passed like that. His health kept going down, and the family became desperate. They started thinking maybe someone was jealous of them. After all, their life had changed quickly. They had received money, their condition had improved, and then they had a son. Maybe, they thought, someone had cursed them. So one day, someone suggested they visit a medium. The parents went, hoping for an answer. The medium listened quietly and then said, "He is waiting for you to fulfill your promises." The father asked, "Who is waiting?" And the medium said, "God." The parents froze. The medium explained, "You asked at too many God's homes for a son. One of them blessed you. But now that God is waiting for you to keep the promise you made there, He gave you what you asked for, but you forgot what you promised in return. The mother began crying because they had made so many promises in so many places. They had even taught their daughters to ask for a brother. How could they know which god's home had answered them? The medium said, "He is angry. Your son's health is suffering because of that anger. The one who gives can also take away." The family was terrified. After that, they began praying with a different heart, not asking for more, not bargaining, not offering things like a trade. They asked for forgiveness. They admitted they had been careless with their promises. For nearly a month, they prayed, visited the places they remembered, and did what they could to make things right. And then, slowly, Arif's health began to improve. The fever stopped coming back. His body became stronger. His face looked alive again. Within a short time, he was running around the house like he had never been sick at all. And from that day on, the family never treated prayer like a bargain again. Have you ever walked past an old theater and felt, just for a second, that someone inside was watching you? That's the feeling people still talk about when they remember Eastgate Cinema in Wan Chai. It opened in the mid-1960s, right around the corner of two busy streets, and at first, it looked like pure glamour. There was a polished stone lobby, soft, artistic lighting, and more than 1,000 seats waiting in the dark. People came from all over Hong Kong to watch films there. Tourists came too. From the outside, it was just another beautiful cinema. But the land had a different memory. Before the theater was built, the site had been a funeral parlor. For years, families had gone there to say goodbye to the dead. Then the funeral home moved away, the building was torn down, and the cinema rose in its place. And maybe that should have been the end of it. But according to the stories, it wasn't. Not long after Eastgate Cinema opened, strange things started happening. Staff whispered about cold spots in the hallways. Some customers said they felt uneasy the moment they stepped inside, like the darkness in the theater was a little too heavy. The most famous story was about a woman who went into the ladies' restroom during a movie. She stood at the mirror, fixing herself up, when she noticed someone behind her. A woman with long black hair was slowly combing it. At first, she thought it was just another customer. But when she looked more closely, she froze. The woman in the mirror had no face, no eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just smooth, pale skin where a face should have been. The customer ran out shaking. In some versions of the story, it gets even worse. They say when she left the cubicle, she saw a headless woman standing at the sink, calmly combing the hair on her own severed head. People later claimed that part of the restroom had been built near where the old mortuary once stood. Whether that's true or not, it made the story harder to forget. Then there was the night of the impossible full house. One usher said the cinema had been nearly empty when the film began. Only a few people had bought tickets. But halfway through the screening, he looked across the room and saw every seat filled. Not with ordinary customers, with pale, silent figures. They sat stiffly in the dark, moving their hands in strange little motions, almost like they were performing some kind of ritual. The usher was too frightened to speak, but when the lights came on after the movie, the room was almost empty again. Only the real customers remained. Everyone else had vanished. After that, some workers refused to take late shifts. A few reportedly quit altogether. And from then on, when people said a cinema had a full house, the phrase carried a colder meaning. There was another story, too, about the rear stairwell. A man had stepped out during a movie to smoke. As he stood there in the dim light, he felt a tap on his shoulder. A voice said, very politely, "Brother, can I borrow a light?" He turned and saw a man standing behind him. His face was gray and sunken, his eyes dark and hollow. Still, the smoker handed him the lighter. The stranger lit his cigarette, said thank you, and then simply disappeared into the shadows. After that, people said the stairwell never felt empty. Even when no one was there, you had the feeling someone was standing just behind you. Other stories gathered around the cinema over the years, faces appearing in mirrors, old men lying beneath the seats, tickets that suddenly felt thin and brittle, like funeral paper. Maybe some of it came from tired eyes, flickering lights, and nervous imaginations. Cinemas are strange places after all. You sit in the dark with strangers, staring at ghosts made of light. But Eastgate had something more. It had a past people couldn't quite bury. The cinema eventually closed in the 1970s. The building was torn down, and a modern office tower took its place. Today, if you pass by, you won't see the old lobby, the rows of seats, or the shadowy staircase. But stories don't need buildings to survive. They live in the telling. And that's why people still remember Eastgate Cinema. Not just as a place where movies once played, but as a place where the past seemed to sit quietly among the living, waiting for the lights to go out. I was driving back from Texas headed toward Mississippi when I decided to pull off near Poverty Point in Louisiana. The sun was already sinking, and honestly, I almost kept driving. But I'd heard about the place before, and something in me thought, just go, stretch your legs, see it for yourself. So I did. When I got there, the park was closed. No people, no noise, just fields, low fog, and this huge old mound rising out of the ground, like it had been waiting there forever. I walked up the trail, and at first, it felt peaceful, beautiful even. The sky was fading orange and purple, and the mist was hanging close to the grass. It felt ancient. Then I noticed a car pull in behind mine. A man got out and looked around my truck. I figured maybe it was a ranger. Maybe I wasn't supposed to be there. But I was already too far along the path, so I kept going. I made it to the top of the mound and stayed there a while, just watching the last light disappear. At one point, I shouted, "Hello," just to hear the echo, and it carried way farther than I expected. Then the woods changed. The insects got louder all at once, not gradually. It was like someone turned up the volume on the whole place. Then something started howling from the trees below. It sounded almost like a dog at first, then longer, deeper, stranger. I stood there listening until it stopped, and when it did, the whole area went quiet again. That should have been enough for me to leave fast, but I started walking back through the field. I kept hearing something in the woods. When I walked, it moved. When I stopped, it stopped. I told myself it was an armadillo or some animal, because that was easier than thinking about anything else. Then, when I was maybe 40 yards from my truck, another car came down the road. That's when I saw it. At first, it was just a small, dark shape in the fog. I thought maybe it was an armadillo. Then it got bigger. Maybe a dog. Then bigger again. It was running beside the road, chasing the car. For a few seconds, it looked like it stood upright. Its arms were down at its sides, and it moved on two legs in this stiff, unnatural way. My brain kept trying to explain it. A person? A ranger messing with me? Some animal caught in the headlights? Then it dropped forward and ran on all fours. It was fast. Too fast. Long-limbed, gray-brown, with a tail, but not like any animal I could name. Another car came up behind it, and the headlights hit it just enough for me to see the body before it disappeared into the dark. I just stood there. I couldn't make sense of it. It was like my mind kept flipping through pictures. Dog, panther, monkey, coyote, person. None of them fit. I called my cousin and said, "Stay on the phone with me. I'm not crazy, but I need you to talk to me until I get to my car." Those last few steps felt endless. When the truck lights flashed as I unlocked it, I have never felt so relieved in my life. I got in, locked the doors, and just sat there trying to explain what I'd seen. I still don't know what it was. Later, I looked up local legends. Some things sounded close. Rougarou, Dogman, shapeshifter stories. Even some older native stories people connect to places like that. But I'm not saying I know what I saw. I'm only saying this. Something crossed that field in front of me that night, and it didn't move like anything I've ever seen in the real world. I grew up in a small village in South Gujarat, India, and honestly, people from rural places will probably understand what I mean right away. In my village, things like black magic, ghosts, spirits, and curses were never treated like stories made up to scare children. They were part of life. People spoke about them carefully, sometimes quietly, but nobody laughed them off. Even after I started studying abroad during my teenage years, most of the people around me, whether relatives, family friends, or classmates from similar backgrounds, still understood that these things were not something to mock. So when I first met people who genuinely did not believe in ghosts, witches, or black magic, it surprised me more than I can explain. I was still quite young then, and even now, it feels strange to me. I am not saying this because I want to force anyone to believe what I believe. I learned early that you cannot push belief into someone's hands and expect them to hold it. Some people will reject anything that does not fit their worldview, no matter what they see or hear. You could show someone the clearest truth in front of them, and if they have already decided not to accept it, they simply will not. But what worries me is how many people get hurt because they refuse to even consider that they might be wrong. Back home, black magic is taken seriously. When something like that happens, people usually recognize it quickly and try to deal with it. Not always perfectly, of course, but at least they do not ignore it until it is too late. Most of the time, the person affected survives because the family acts fast. But while studying in New Zealand, I saw two situations that shook me deeply. The first was a relative named Nilesh. I had attended his wedding, and I remember him as a kind man, maybe a little too trusting, but not a bad person at all. He did not believe in ghosts or black magic. A few years later, another relative admitted that she had done black magic on him. Shortly after his wedding, he suddenly became very sick with what seemed like the flu. He had been healthy before that, a young man in his early 30s, full of life, and then within days, he was gone. People can call it coincidence if they want. I understand that. But for those of us who knew the details, it did not feel natural. The second person was a family friend named Rohan. He called himself a secular humanist, and he was very firm about not believing in God, spirits, or anything beyond what he could explain. I always felt he was too dismissive, not because he asked questions, but because he refused to respect even the possibility that something could exist outside his understanding. One day, his mother was given food by a woman she barely knew. There were concerns that something had been done to it, but Rohan ate it anyway because he wanted to prove that black magic was nonsense. A few days later, he became severely ill. A spiritual practitioner in India was contacted, and interestingly, he did not say to avoid doctors. He actually told the family that Rohan needed to go to the hospital as part of the treatment. But Rohan refused for several days, partly because he did not want to follow advice that came from someone connected to the paranormal. By the time he finally went, his condition had become very serious. He slipped into a coma and passed away soon after. The cause was never clearly explained. I know some people listening to this may not believe any of it. Maybe you grew up in a place where disbelief felt safe. where the paranormal was treated like entertainment or superstition. I understand that your life may have taught you something different, but from where I come from, ignoring these things can be dangerous. Questioning is fine. I actually think it is healthy to question. But refusing to look at evidence, inventing explanations just to avoid discomfort, or mocking people who have experienced these things is not wisdom. It is pride dressed up as logic. When life is normal, it is easy to say, "I don't believe in any of that." It is easy to laugh when nothing is happening to you. But if one day you feel deep down that something is wrong, if you are experiencing hauntings, strange disturbances, or signs of black magic, please do not ignore it just to protect your pride. Speak to someone trusted, not a random person online, not someone who wants to scare you or take advantage of you, but a known and respected expert. A genuine person will not tell you to reject medical or psychological help. In fact, many of them will encourage it if they think it is needed. Real help should protect you from every side. Now that I am older, I am trying to understand people who do not believe. I am trying to have more patience and sympathy because I know everyone comes from a different life and different experiences. But I also feel strongly that awareness matters, especially about black magic. I do not have a full plan yet, but I know I want to do something. Even if it only helps a few people take these things more seriously before it is too late, that would matter to me. So my wife and I drove about 4.5 hours from Maryland to visit this old asylum I've been wanting to see for years. Ever since I was a teenager and watched a paranormal special film there, I got completely pulled into the history of Kirkbride buildings. I mean, fully pulled in. The architecture, the stories, the atmosphere, all of it just stayed with me. We got there yesterday and basically went straight to the asylum. We had a guided paranormal tour scheduled for later that night, around 9:30, so we decided to do the daytime historical tours first. Our first guide was Maddie, and she took us through the North Wing. A lot of people had recommended that tour because the night tour doesn't go through that section. It ended up just being my wife, me, and the guide, which made everything feel more personal and honestly, a little more intense. During the daytime historical tours, they're not supposed to talk about paranormal activity. If something strange happens and there's any possible normal explanation, they're expected to explain it away. Maintenance, another tour, someone nearby, things like that. The North Wing used to house some of the more difficult patients, including people moved from the forensic building. There were also recovery rooms connected to lobotomy procedures, including one area for documented surgeries and another tied to more experimental procedures. We were allowed to walk around some of those recovery rooms for a bit. At one point, my wife and I were in one of the side rooms, and I knocked that little shave and a haircut rhythm on the wall and asked if anyone there could finish it. Nothing happened right away, but later, as we were walking outside to look at the exterior part of the campus, we heard 2 loud bangs on a window from the recovery ward. Not soft taps, loud bangs. That part of the building wasn't even restored enough for visitors to safely enter. Maddie looked startled for just a second, then told us another guide sometimes liked to mess with her if he saw her outside. But from what we understood, nobody was supposed to be in that wing except the owner or maintenance and security staff. That was the first moment where I thought, okay, that was odd. Our second tour that day was with Jessa. It was about 90 minutes and covered all the floors of the main building, plus part of the medical center. Nothing huge happened on that one, but a few rooms really affected me physically. The seclusion rooms in the aggressive women's ward gave me this sudden sharp headache and a wave of nausea that felt very unlike me. The strangest moment happened on the 4th floor, near the area that leads up toward the clock tower. The whole group heard a whistle come from down one of the hallways. I didn't say anything at first, but another woman asked if anyone else had heard it. Jessa just gave this knowing little smile and didn't comment. I also kept smelling cigarette smoke throughout the main building that morning, especially near the front lobby by the restored ward. It would come and go, but it was strong enough that I kept noticing it. Later that night, we came back for the guided paranormal tour. I'm pretty sure our guide's name was Jake, and he knew that place incredibly well. What I appreciated most was that he seemed naturally skeptical. He wasn't trying to make everything spooky. That actually made the strange things feel more believable. Across the whole tour, I kept feeling lightheaded in certain places. There was also this pressure in the air sometimes, almost like tension before a storm. I had headaches, ear pain, and even some eye pain in different spots. On the first floor, in the restored admissions wing that later became a geriatric unit, my wife suddenly smelled something awful in a room away from the group. She said it was like sour body odor mixed with rot, and that it burned her nose. Then it vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. A little later, we rounded a corner into what used to be a nurse's station. While we were standing quietly and listening to Jake talk, we heard what sounded like someone speaking nonsense words, almost like an adult imitating a toddler. There was also a faint sound underneath it, like a TV or radio playing in another room. That one genuinely scared me. It didn't feel playful. It felt strange in a way I still don't really know how to explain. On the second floor, which had also been used for geriatric overflow, certain rooms smelled strongly of fresh urine. I know that sounds unpleasant to mention, but I used to work in elder care, and I know that smell. This wasn't old building smell. It smelled fresh, and I'm almost positive no one had used a restroom anywhere near that room. The third floor had a completely different feeling. There are said to be two former residents, Frankie and Lenny, who were close friends when they lived there. Their room has 2 closets and a table in the middle with playing cards, cigarettes, money, photographs, magazines, and other little offerings people have left behind. The first time we went into that room, all 6 of us heard what sounded like furniture being dragged in a room down the hall. The second time we went in, my wife touched the table, and immediately there was this loud clicking or clinking sound from the closets. We found out the next day that people often associate that sound with Frankie and Lenny wanting to play cards. That room actually felt lighter than the rest of the building, almost like a break room in the middle of all that heaviness. The fourth floor was the one that stuck with me the most. My wife and I both saw this strange shadow shape near a window at the end of a hallway. It moved in this wavy, almost snake-like way, dipping in and out of view. My first instinct was to turn around. It was like my brain said, "You are not supposed to be seeing this." But my wife kept staring at it. Later she told me she felt suddenly angry for no reason and almost compelled to keep watching it. She was actually upset when the guide moved us along. Once we got off that floor, the feeling faded for both of us. I also smelled burning wood as soon as we got onto that floor, which was strange because it didn't seem to be coming from anywhere obvious. We came back today for the daytime paranormal tour. Not as much happened, but there were still a few things I can't shake. In the aggressive women's ward, we kept smelling perfume. Strong, old-fashioned perfume, almost like something from an Avon bottle. It didn't seem like it was coming from anyone in our group. At one point, it smelled like someone had sprayed it directly in front of my face. Later, I stepped out of a small room, walked into the next one, then crossed the hall and stood near an old whiteboard and a fire extinguisher while waiting for my wife. I was looking through a doorway at the end of the hall when I saw a figure move from right to left in maybe 3 strides. It didn't feel negative. It actually felt more like a staff member rushing somewhere than a resident spirit. Just quick, purposeful, and gone. Our guide for that tour was Kylie. Her father works as a paranormal investigator at the asylum, and she showed us several photos people had captured there. Some of the shadow figures looked incredibly human, with shapes that seemed to show clothing and posture. She also showed us a photo of a wet human footprint found on the 4th floor, and it appeared to have 6 toes. There was also a video from the medical building where a guest heard a terrible scream in the room with him. He panicked immediately and wanted out. Honestly, after hearing the video, I don't blame him at all. That scream was awful. I would have left too. By the end of the trip, I just kept thinking, this place is real. Maybe not every single thing has a paranormal explanation, and I'm okay with that. But there were too many moments, too many small things stacked together to just brush it all off. We're already planning to go back, probably for an overnight investigation later in the summer or early fall. I don't know exactly what's in that building, but something is there. And if you spend enough time inside, I really do think something will make itself known. I'm the oldest child in my family, and I'm 20 now. My younger brother Ryan was born in 2009, so he's 16. Before he came along, though, my mom went through a really painful stretch. Around 2008 and early 2009, she had several pregnancies that didn't make it. Some were miscarriages, and some were medical emergencies tied to complications with her blood type. She's A negative, my dad is O positive, and because she was still pretty young and things got complicated, most of those pregnancies ended early. But the one right before Ryan was different. That baby was a boy, and my mom lost him around the 7th month. She saw him after he was delivered. He was still, and I don't think that image ever really left her. Not long after that, she had my brother, and as we grew up, she would tell us something I never knew how to process. She said sometimes she could see that baby or hear him crying. She said it happened so strongly at times that she would start lactating, even though she knew it wasn't Ryan crying. And this didn't just happen once or twice. It carried on through my brother's childhood. Now that we're older, she still talks about him. She says whenever she starts to forget him, even a little, he shows up again. And the thing is, I'm not particularly religious. I'm not someone who jumps to spiritual explanations. Neither is my brother. But we've both had moments in this house where we felt something. Lately, I've even started seeing him too. Not clearly. Not like someone standing in front of me having a conversation. It's more like a tall, thin figure passing through the edge of my vision, wandering through the house like he lives here too. My mom has this theory that he feels left out. Whenever she buys something for Ryan out of love, or whenever our family is happy and laughing together, she thinks he gets upset. Not angry exactly. More like he wants to be included. We live right under the terrace, and in the evenings, we sometimes hear what sounds like someone running around up there. Sometimes it sounds like a ball bouncing. The strange part is that one of our neighbors once told my mom he saw her kid playing with a ball on the terrace. The ball had rolled over to his side, since our terraces are on the same level and right next to each other, so he returned it. But Rianne hadn't played on the terrace in years. A few days ago, my mom said she was in her room and heard someone tossing a ball in the hallway outside her bedroom, over and over again. Throwing it, chasing it, throwing it again. She checked, and it wasn't Rianne. He was asleep. There was another time that still sticks with me. It was summer break, late at night, probably around 2 in the morning. Rianne and I were in the living room watching movies. We were laughing a lot, getting along better than usual, just having one of those rare sibling nights where everything feels easy. At some point, I put my earbud case on the sofa. Rianne saw me put it there. Then, seconds later, it was gone. And for some reason, we both got really unsettled. Our house is old and cluttered, so losing something small shouldn't have been a big deal. But this felt different. We searched everywhere. We tore through cushions, checked under furniture, looked in rooms we hadn't even gone into. Eventually, our parents got involved too. Nothing. After hours of searching, we gave up and went back toward the living room. And there it was. The case was sitting neatly on the sofa, right where anyone could see it, directly in the line of sight from the doorway. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't wedged between cushions. It was placed there plainly, almost carefully. Rianne and I didn't even have to say it. We just knew. This summer, I'm back from college, and our family has been planning a big trip. So there's been a lot of family time, a lot of shopping, a lot of excitement. My parents have been buying things for both me and Rianne, and according to my mom's theory, that's exactly the kind of thing that makes him show up. And sure enough, I've been seeing that lanky figure around the house again. The strange thing is, I'm never scared. My mom says she isn't scared either when she sees him. She says he doesn't mean harm. But she also believes he gets jealous sometimes, especially when everyone dotes on Rianne. And honestly, we do. Everyone loves Rianne. He's the youngest, and he gets a lot of affection. Sometimes, after days when he's been especially spoiled or fussed over, Rianne will suddenly feel sick. Just a little fever, a little weakness, nothing serious. By morning, he's usually fine. My mom says it's because the child feels jealous of him. So yeah, I joke sometimes that it's basically middle child syndrome from beyond the veil. But I still wonder about it. Is this normal? Do ghosts grow up with the family they never got to join? A few years back, I went with my then girlfriend and a couple of her friends to do the Waverly Hills Sanatorium tour. It was for one of their birthdays, and I'll be honest with you, I've always been skeptical about paranormal stuff. Not closed off to it exactly. I actually want to believe there's something more out there. I just don't usually accept things unless I've seen them myself. My brain always tries to find the reasonable explanation first before letting me jump to anything supernatural. So we get there, and the guides are doing their usual talks. You can tell some of it is probably something they've said 1,000 times before, but even so, the place has a heavy feeling to it. It's creepy in a way that gets under your skin. Even if you don't believe in ghosts, the history alone is enough to make the whole building feel charged. We moved through different parts of the facility, and our guide showed us some strange photos that had supposedly been taken in the rooms we were standing in. He also took us down near the tunnel they used back then, and honestly, the whole tour was really interesting. I learned a lot. But at that point, I still felt like most of it was probably just part of the experience. A haunted tourist attraction, you know? Creepy, well done, but still a show. Eventually, we got to the dorm and kitchen area. The guide started telling us about the hauntings people had reported there. The dorm rooms were small, maybe around 12 feet across, with old door frames instead of actual doors. On one side, there was a balcony area. On the other side was the hallway where our group was standing. Then the guide said he wanted to try something with shadow figures, or shadow people. Personally, I've always thought that kind of thing could be your brain playing tricks on you in the right lighting. And the fact that he wanted everyone to stand in one very specific place made me even more suspicious. He started calling people up one at a time, and while everyone else was focused on that, I just began looking around the building. That's when I looked through the doorway right beside me. Across the room, on the far side, I saw a man standing there. I couldn't make out his face clearly. It was too dark. But there was this faint bluish light around him. I still don't know if it came from him, or if maybe there was some emergency light nearby that I didn't notice. He looked about 5'9". He had shoulder-length white hair, a white shirt, a faded denim jacket, denim pants, and a bit of a belly. He was just standing there. looking in our direction. We stared at each other for what felt like forever, but it was probably only 15 seconds. And here's the thing that bothered me right away. From where he was standing, he wouldn't have been able to see whatever shadow experiment the guide was doing. So whether he was a real person or something else, it was deeply unsettling. Just this man standing completely still across a supposedly haunted dorm room, watching in silence. Then he turned and slowly started walking away. The second his face passed behind the wall, I moved. I practically jumped through that dorm room. One step in the middle, then straight to the other doorway, looking in the direction he'd gone. There was no one there. My first thought was that maybe he ducked into another dorm room nearby, but he would have had to move fast. Really fast. And when I checked, there was no sign of him anywhere. That alone would have been strange enough, and honestly, it stuck with me. But the part that really made me question everything happened after we got home. We were exhausted, but we still had to take care of the dog and the cat. Both of them came right up to greet us when we walked in, so we knew exactly where they were. We sat down in the living room for a minute, just trying to settle back in. Then a ball came flying out of my office and rolled into the living room. Both animals were sitting with us. I went into the office and checked it the same way I had checked those dorm rooms. Nothing. Nobody there. Nothing out of place that explained it. That happened about 4 years ago, and I still think about it. I'm not saying I have every answer. I don't. But I do believe we ran into something that night. And one last thing. After I saw that man, I started paying close attention to everyone in our group and all the workers whenever we got into brighter, more open areas. I looked hard. Not one person there had that white shoulder-length hair. Not one person was dressed like him. Last night, I was on the phone with my friend Marius, and somehow we ended up deep in a conversation about Gnosticism. He is Christian, but not in the way where he takes every single thing in the Bible as literal law. He sees a lot of it as symbolic, almost like a map written in metaphor. So when I bring up different beliefs, different religions, spiritual ideas, or teachings I've been studying, he actually listens. He may not agree with everything, but he stays open. I started telling him about the demiurge, the archons, and the whole idea behind Gnosticism. I'm still learning, so I know I might not explain everything perfectly, but I was trying to talk through what I understood. I kept coming back to the demiurge, this ignorant creator figure who made this world and keeps souls trapped here, feeding off our emotions, our pain, our fear, our energy. I don't even know if I have the right words for it, but that was the feeling I was trying to describe. Then the conversation drifted into this heavier place. We started talking about how, honestly, we both kind of hope none of these religions are actually true. He asked me, what if there are other worlds out there? Other planets with beings like us, or even more advanced than us? And I said, they're probably doing the same thing we are, making stories, creating gods, building religions, trying to explain why they're here. That thought made both of us feel tired in a strange way. Like, what if every conscious being everywhere is stuck asking the same impossible questions? Then Marius just kind of threw his hands up and said, I don't want that. I really don't want that. And I understood him completely. We both said it might be easier if, after death, there was just nothing. Just darkness, no judgment, no God, no demiurge, no endless spiritual puzzle to solve. You live, you do what you choose to do, and then it is over. If you want to be kind, you be kind. If you do not care, that is still your choice. No cosmic scoreboard, no one fighting over who had the truth. I hope that makes sense. I know it sounds messy when I say it out loud, but that is honestly where my mind was. During the conversation, I kept talking about the demiurge almost like I was challenging him. I called him ignorant. I called him flawed. I said humans are a reflection of that same energy. Jealous, emotional, prideful, selfish, wounded. And if people believe we were made in his image, then it feels strange to worship something that carries the same brokenness we do. To me, the real higher power has to be somewhere inside us. That is one thing I keep coming back to with Gnosticism. The idea that there is a spark in us, some kind of inner light. Maybe we are supposed to remember that. Maybe we are supposed to become connected, like one collective consciousness. But in this world, in this realm, it feels almost impossible. This place feels too divided, too heavy, too built on confusion. Eventually, we ended the call by saying, "Let's just hope there is nothing after this. No demiurge, no trap, no spiritual war. Just peace." Then we hung up. I went to bed not long after. My back had been hurting, so I had a warm heating pad tucked against it. I was lying on my stomach, holding my stuffed bear close, and I fell asleep pretty fast because I was exhausted. Sometimes, right after I close my eyes, I get this short little dream before I actually fall into a deeper sleep. It usually happens within the first 20 minutes. I'll dream, wake up for a second, and then go back to sleep for real. That happened again. I cannot remember what the first dream was about, but I know it was not scary. I just remember slowly waking up from it, the way I usually do. But as I was waking up, something felt wrong. It felt like sleep paralysis, but not the kind I normally experience. Usually, I cannot move at all. This time, I could move my arms. I could open my eyes. My upper body was not completely frozen, but my lower body felt stuck, almost disconnected, like it was pinned to the bed. Then I opened my eyes fully, and I saw something. There was this dark figure in my room, completely black. Not shadowy in a soft way, but deep, heavy black. I could see its eyes, though. They looked pale, almost white. I could not really make out its lower body, but the upper half looked large, especially the head. It had something hanging down from it, maybe long hair or thick strands. And it had 2 black horns. They were not huge, but they were clear enough that I knew what I was seeing. It kept jerking toward me, like it was trying to rush at me in short bursts. It would move forward, then stop, then move forward again. It felt like something was holding it back, like it wanted to get closer, but could only come so far. I was terrified. Not just scared, but shocked in a way that made everything feel unreal. My arms were kind of holding me up, but my lower body would not respond. All I could do was stare at it. I do not even know if I fully felt the fear in the moment, because the shock was louder than everything else. Then, after a little while, it was gone. I looked around my room, trying to understand what had just happened. My heart was racing. The whole room felt different, like the air had been disturbed. I started praying. I prayed to the Almighty, to the Divine, to anything truly good and higher than whatever that thing was. I rebuked it. I kept saying it over and over, telling it to leave me alone, telling it had no place near me. Then I got up and used Florida water around my space because I needed to do something physical. I needed my room to feel like mine again. After that, I was not exactly scared anymore, but I was still shaken. I kept sitting there thinking, what was that? Was it connected to what we had been talking about? Was it the demiurge? Was it something under him? Or was it just my mind pulling something from the conversation and turning it into a nightmare? I do not know. But it felt real, and even now, I keep wondering what actually came into my room that night. I think this happened in early 2023, maybe late February or March. I'm not completely sure, but I remember there was still snow and ice everywhere. My friend Marin and I decided for some ridiculous reason to go up to the hot springs in the middle of the night. It was probably close to midnight. We were not dressed for it at all. No proper boots, no traction, nothing smart. Just the two of us sliding around like newborn deer on this icy trail. We made it a couple miles in, slipping and falling the whole way, and eventually we both realized, okay, if we keep going, we're going to have to hike all the way back, soaked, freezing, and miserable. So we gave up and decided we'd come back another time. The hike back was normal at first. Nothing felt strange. Nothing felt creepy. We were cold and annoyed, but that was really it. Then we got back to the road, and the parking lot was still maybe half a mile away. The whole road had this thick sheet of ice over it, so we were walking really carefully. At one point, Marin stopped because there was this frozen waterfall along the rocks beside us, and she wanted to take a picture. She took the photo, looked at it for a second, and then got quiet. I asked her, "What?" And she said, "I don't know why, but I feel like I shouldn't have taken that." I thought that was strange, so I asked, "Why not?" She just said, "I don't know. I'm deleting it." So she deleted the picture. And right after that, we heard the ice crack beneath us 3 times. Not little cracks, not natural shifting. It sounded exactly like someone very heavy was running toward us, hitting the ice hard with each step. Like someone with a staff, pounding it into the ground. Crack, crack, crack. And then it stopped right at our feet. We were not standing on a frozen lake or anything like that. We were on a paved road with maybe 3 inches of solid ice over it. It should not have been cracking like that. Not with that kind of force. Not in that pattern. It felt intentional. We both froze. I grabbed her, she grabbed me, and for a second, neither of us moved. Then we both knew, without really needing to say it, that we had to get back to the car. So we started walking as fast as we could without wiping out. We were holding on to each other, trying not to slip, and we could hear footsteps behind us. They were moving back and forth. First one side of the road, then the other. Then they seemed to move up the hill on our right, still keeping pace with us. The worst part was this overwhelming feeling that we should not turn around. It wasn't just fear. It was more like a warning inside my body. Don't look. Don't acknowledge it too much. Just keep moving. We did say out loud that something was following us. We were praying too, just asking for protection, talking to each other enough to stay calm, but not too much. The river was down below us on the left, flowing the opposite direction from where we were walking. And then I started hearing a man's voice from that direction. It sounded like he was floating along beside us somehow, keeping pace with us from down by the water. In my mind, I kept getting this image of a man drifting on something, maybe a raft, though I have no idea why. At first, the voice was going back and forth between chuckling and crying, laughing a little, then sobbing, then laughing again. I told Marin, "I'm hearing a man's voice." She said she could still only hear the footsteps. And as soon as she said that, the voice changed. It said, "Help." Then again, louder, "Help." Then a third time, "Help." It didn't sound like someone who truly needed help. It sounded like someone pretending. Like it knew we weren't going to fall for it, so it was just trying to scare us instead. After the third time, Marin said, "I hear it now." That made it worse somehow. Finally, we could see the parking lot ahead of us. As soon as it came into view, the man's voice turned into this wild, hysterical laughter. Just laughing and laughing from down by the river. Then the footsteps up on the hill to our right stopped sounding like footsteps, and something started whispering at us. "Wait." Then louder. "Wait." Then, "Come back." The voice by the river started fading, but the thing on the hill kept calling after us. By then, there were patches where we could see the actual ground under the ice, so we stopped being careful and just ran. We got to the car, jumped in, shut the doors, and drove away. And that was it. I've been to those hot springs during the day, and honestly, they're beautiful, peaceful, quiet. The kind of place that feels almost unreal in a good way. But I don't think I'll ever go back there at night. Not even with a group. I've experienced strange things before, but that night felt different. It felt like something was playing with us, and it wanted us to know it was there. That is one place I will never whistle in the dark. I honestly don't even know where to start. Before the pandemic, my family moved into this newly built house. At first, everything felt normal. Nothing strange, nothing scary. It just felt like a fresh start. But then the pandemic happened, and suddenly I was stuck at home all the time. My sleep schedule got completely ruined. I would sleep in the morning and study at night, so most nights I was alone at the dining table, trying to focus. Our dining table had 6 chairs. One night, while I was studying, I saw something in my peripheral vision. It looked like people were sitting around the table. Not shadows, not vague shapes. People. And they were wearing barong. I tried to calm myself down. I kept thinking, "You're just tired. You need sleep. This is probably just your mind playing tricks on you." But even while I was telling myself that, I was scared. I tried to stand up, but both of my feet suddenly felt freezing cold. It was that awful feeling where you know your feet are there, but you can't move them. So I just sat back down and stayed still. After a while, I could finally feel my feet again, and the second I could move, I ran straight to the bed and stayed beside my mom. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Back then, I had this cheap Huawei phone. I don't remember the exact model, but I remember one thing clearly. When the battery got too low, maybe around 15 or 18%, it wouldn't let me use the flashlight anymore. One night, there was a brownout. My mom asked me to go to the kitchen and get the lighter. Now, our kitchen sink had black tiles around it, and you could clearly see your reflection there. So I went in, found the lighter, and when I looked at the tile near the sink, I saw someone standing behind me. It was a man. He was wearing a tuxedo. I froze. Then right at that moment, my phone's flashlight shut off because the battery was low. Everything went dark. I ran. I didn't care that I couldn't see properly. I almost tripped on the stairs, but I just kept going. And yes, I have brothers, but none of them would be wearing a tuxedo at night in that heat. Also, it definitely wasn't them. The shape, the height, everything was wrong. Another time, my nephew had just gone back to his mother's side of the family. I was actually relieved because the house was finally quiet. I was alone, and since it was still morning, I decided to clean. While I was moving one of the chairs, I saw a little boy run past me. He was laughing. Even though the chair I was holding was heavy, my eyes followed him. Then when I turned, I saw a girl sitting on the stairs. In my head, I even remember thinking, "She's pretty." Then suddenly it hit me. I was alone. There were no kids in the house. No one was supposed to be there. And the strangest part is, after I realized that, I couldn't remember what the girl looked like anymore. It was like the memory of her face just disappeared. I ended up going outside and waiting there until someone came home. There was also this one time when I was in the room I shared with my mom. I was lying on my stomach using my phone with my back facing the door. I heard the door creak open. Then I heard footsteps on the tile. After that, I felt someone sit on the bed. I assumed it was my mom. Usually my mom talks to me first, but that time she was quiet. So I started talking to her. I asked, "What's for dinner?" and said a bunch of other random things. No answer. I hate being ignored, so I was about to turn around and complain. But when I looked toward the part of the bed where I felt someone sit, there was nothing there. Later, I asked my mom and everyone else if they had gone into our room. No one had. My brothers were busy doing their own things, and at that time, it was just me and my mom at home. So apparently, I had been talking to no one. My mom said maybe it was the cat jumping on the bed, but I know it wasn't. If it were my cat, she would have climbed onto my back like she always does. And cats don't wear slippers. I heard slippers on the tile. Another weekend, I woke up around 8 or maybe 10 in the morning. I thought everyone was home. Everything felt normal. I figured my mom was outside feeding the chickens or gossiping with the neighbors, and I thought my third brother was just in his room. I was boiling water near the sink, and again, because of the tiles, I could see reflections. Then I saw my brother's reflection behind me. I even prepared myself because he always liked to poke my waist, and it hurt, so I was ready to fight back. But he just ignored me and walked past. Then I heard his room door slam shut. A little later, I went to our room. Our rooms were right beside each other, separated only by a thick wall. Then I heard something hitting the wall. I could even feel the vibration from it. I thought he was kicking the wall from his side, so I kicked back. It kept annoying me, so I finally decided to go outside and confront him. But just as I was about to do that, my brother entered the house. He had just gotten a haircut. That means he hadn't been in his room at all. My mom had gone out for groceries. My first brother had gone to work. My third brother had gone to get his hair cut. So who did I see in the reflection? And who was I kicking the wall with? There are honestly so many more experiences, but after a while, it started to feel almost normal. A lot of people in my family have a history of seeing things like this. But for me, it didn't really begin when we moved into the new house. It just became harder to ignore. This happened when I was studying at a university in Lucknow. I was staying in the college hostel then, sharing a room with my roommate, Pallavi Didi. By that time, I had already been living in that same room for almost a year and a half, and honestly, nothing had ever felt strange before. It was just a normal hostel room. We studied there, laughed there, slept there, complained about mess food there. Everything was fine. But after my third semester ended, the whole feeling of the room changed. I don't know how to explain it properly, but the room started feeling cold. Not normal cold. It was this deep, uncomfortable chill, the kind that makes you feel like something is standing too close to you. Then, the sleep paralysis began. Almost every day, I would wake up, but not really wake up. My eyes would open, but my body wouldn't move at all. It felt like someone was sitting on my chest, pressing down so hard that I couldn't breathe properly. Some nights, it felt like someone was holding me from behind, tightly, like they didn't want to let me go. I couldn't move my hands. I couldn't move my legs. I couldn't even move my fingers. At first, I kept telling myself, maybe I'm stressed. Maybe it's because of exams. Maybe I'm overthinking. My roommate said the same thing. She told me not to scare myself. So I tried to ignore it. But then the dreams started, and they were not normal dreams. In the dream, I would see myself sleeping exactly the way I was actually sleeping. Same side, same blanket, same bed, same room. Everything looked real, too real. And near my feet, there would be a tall black shadow. It didn't move. It didn't speak. It just stood there, staring at me. That same dream came again and again. Every night, the same room, the same shadow, the same heavy silence. I told Pallavi Didi about it, but she said, maybe it's happening because you keep thinking about it. So again, I tried to push it away. But one afternoon, things became much worse. I came back from class completely exhausted. I didn't even remove my shoes. I just dropped my bag near the bed and lay down. My roommate was in the library, and she usually returned around evening. I fell asleep almost immediately. And then I saw that same dream again. But this time, the shadow didn't just stand near my feet. It came closer. Slowly, it reached my bed. Then I felt something touch my leg, starting from my ankle and moving upward toward my thigh. I woke up instantly, and the worst part was, I could still feel that touch. It wasn't like a dream fading away. It felt physical, real, like someone had actually touched me. I got so scared that I ran out of the room and went straight to another friend's room. I stayed there until my roommate came back. After that day, I couldn't convince myself that the room was normal anymore. Then one night, I was awake on my phone. It was after 2 a.m. Pallavi Didi was asleep, and we had left the door slightly open for ventilation. Suddenly, I saw someone enter the room. It looked like a short figure, walking quietly inside. I froze. I thought maybe it was my roommate returning from the washroom. But the figure walked toward the mirror. And the moment it reached there, it disappeared into the darkness. My whole body went cold. I immediately looked at my roommate's bed. She was still sleeping. I called her name again and again until she woke up. I asked her, "Did you just go to the washroom?" She looked confused and said, "No, I didn't go anywhere." That was when my heart just dropped. I jumped out of bed, shut the door properly, and started reciting Ayat ul-Kursi out loud. I told her everything. That night, I couldn't sleep on my own bed, so I slept beside her. After all this, I went home and told my mother everything. Now, I don't really believe in movies and all of that, but my mother does. She was worried, so she said we should go meet one. We went to see a movie. He didn't ask many questions. He only asked my name and what had been happening to me. Then he sat quietly, closed his eyes, and started doing something strange, like touching the ground with his finger and whispering near his ear. After about 15 minutes, he opened his eyes and said, "Where you stay, there is a narrow lane nearby, and there is a mosque there, right?" I was shocked, because yes, there was a mosque near my hostel. But he didn't know where I lived. He didn't even know I was staying in Lucknow. Then he said, "Someone near that mosque has done black magic on you. They sent a jinn to watch you. That person cannot come near you directly, so they sent it to follow you, scare you, and disturb your mind." I just sat there, frozen. He told me to pray more, to be regular with namaz, and to protect myself spiritually. He said someone had a very bad eye on me. Then he performed some rituals. He made me touch a few things, and then told me to stare at some sweets for almost an hour. After that, those things were taken away and thrown into a river. He said it was an offering, something meant to make the jinn leave me alone. He never told us who had done it, but before we left, he said one thing that still stays with me. He said, "Don't eat anything given by strangers. The person who did this likes you. They want to break your mind. That is why they sent it." After that day, everything slowly became normal again. The sleep paralysis stopped. The dreams stopped. The room felt like a room again. But that black shadow near my feet, I will never forget it. For a little bit of context, I honestly do believe I've always had some sort of spiritual sensitivity, even if it's only a quiet, small kind of thing. I get these strange gut feelings, and they're not always easy to explain. I remember knowing the last time I saw my granddad would be the last time. I have the same feeling with someone close to my partner's family too. Neither of them was unwell at the time, so there was no real reason for me to think that. But within a few weeks, both of them had passed away. I also had an incredibly vivid dream about my dad dying not long before it actually happened. It was so intense that I told a few of my friends about it because I couldn't shake it. Another time, I woke up in the middle of the night so suddenly that I startled my partner awake as well. The next day, I found out that around that exact time, my best friend's mother had died. And I've seen things too. I don't really know what else to call them except spirits. They look like real people for a second, usually out of the corner of my eye, and then they just disappear. But the worst of it happened when I was a teenager. I swear the house I lived in back then was haunted. I used to hear footsteps moving down the hallway beside my bedroom when nobody else was home. I constantly felt like I was being watched. One night, I was in the shower when this freezing cold breeze suddenly came over me. It was so cold that I got goosebumps everywhere, even though I was standing under really hot water and the whole bathroom was full of steam. I closed my eyes and stood directly under the water, trying to warm myself back up. Then I heard this huge bang. It sounded exactly like someone had slapped their hand hard against the shower glass. I opened my eyes, and there was a handprint on the screen. Clear as anything. Just one handprint. The fingers looked wrong somehow, like they were too short or strangely shaped compared to the palm. Then, almost immediately, my phone started ringing. It was an unknown number. I don't know why I answered it, especially standing there in the shower, but I did. I said, "Hello?" And all I heard was my own voice echoing back at me. "Hello. Hello. Hello." I jumped out, wrapped myself in a towel, and ran straight to my mom's room. I slept in her bed that night, which I hadn't done since I was little. Another night, I came home late and noticed my bedroom light was on. I knew I hadn't left it on. When I looked inside, I saw what looked like a little girl standing in my room. I completely froze. I ended up sitting outside in my car, too scared to go in. Then the little air freshener hanging from my rearview mirror suddenly started swinging violently. It was hitting the roof of the car and smacking against the windshield like something had grabbed it. Eventually, I forced myself to go inside. When I got to my room, the light was off, and nobody was there. At one point, a group of friends agreed to stay over because I'd told them what had been happening. The next morning, every single one of us woke up with random bruises. There were about 6 of us, and all of us had them. No one could explain it. Then there was the day I came home in the afternoon and was making food in the kitchen. I looked up and saw someone in a dark gray hoodie step backward behind the wall. I was absolutely terrified. The only reason I didn't call the police was because I'd already been dealing with so many strange things in that house, and part of me was scared I'd embarrass myself if nobody was really there. Instead, I messaged my mom and my best friend's parents and asked them to come over and check the house. I sat on the kitchen floor holding a knife until they arrived. They searched everywhere and found no one. My mom told me not to mention any of it to my sister because she spent a lot of time home alone and didn't want her frightened. But years after we moved out, my sister randomly told me that she used to see a man in a gray hoodie in that house too. I hadn't told her that part. For a while, I moved overseas to stay with relatives, and even there, strange things followed me. One night, I turned the lights off and was walking upstairs when I felt a hard shove into my shoulder. It pushed me straight into the wall, hard enough that it cracked the side of my cousin's laptop, which I was carrying at the time. I went into my room and left a lamp on because I was too scared to be in the dark. Then the lamp blew. At that point, I decided I was going to sleep in my cousin's room instead, but when I tried to leave, my bedroom door wouldn't open. It felt completely jammed. My cousin eventually came over, and the second he tried opening it from the outside, it opened perfectly. There wasn't one big dramatic moment where everything suddenly ended. It just slowly stopped happening. But I still think about it. I've told people over the years, and I always wonder if they think I'm making it up or that I'm crazy. Even my husband doesn't really believe in that sort of thing, so sometimes I wonder what people actually think when I tell them. But I know what happened. I know what I felt, and I know I wasn't the only one who saw something in that house. I want to tell you about something that happened on a Friday night, because even now, thinking back on it, there's this strange weight to the whole thing. My girlfriend Lena and I had grabbed something to eat, and afterward we headed back towards St. Augustine's School on 6th Avenue. We'd been there before, and we wanted to see if we could investigate again. But when we walked around the back, the whole place was fenced off. There were signs warning about 24-hour security cameras, so we decided not to push it. Instead, we started walking around the neighborhood, just seeing if anything else nearby had the same kind of energy. Almost right away, a black cat crossed in front of us. That caught our attention because the exact same thing had happened to us once before at the Copper Queen Hotel in Bisbee. And sure, you can call it superstition, but when you're already in that mindset, little things start to feel louder. We kept walking, and Lena noticed another cat slipping behind a big stone wall. Then a few houses down, I saw a large black cat stretched out on a porch. A little later, she pointed out a small gray kitten with dark stripes lying oddly in the grass. Something about that kitten really unsettled me. I couldn't tell if it was hurt or just watching us, but the way it stared felt almost too direct. I actually told Lena out loud that it was making me uncomfortable. Eventually, we came across a corner house for sale. Lena said she felt something around it, so we looked around the outside for a bit, but there were people passing by, and it didn't feel right to linger. After that, we found what looked like an abandoned shop and checked the back, but someone was already there, tucked away alone, so we left. Somehow, we ended up back near St. Augustine School. Since it was Friday night and close to the bar scene on 4th Avenue, there was a lot of noise and movement around us. It wasn't exactly peaceful, but the building still had that strange pull. This time, we had brought some new gear: a spirit box, an audio recorder, a couple of sensory balls, EMF readers, and Faraday bags to help cut down on radio interference. We started with the EMF readers. Lena wasn't getting much on hers, but I kept feeling something. The building looked the same, but somehow it didn't feel the same. It felt shifted, almost like it was wearing a different face. I had this strong sense that we were being watched, and that whatever was there was moving around us, just out of reach. The meters didn't show much, but I could feel it. A few people walked by while we were there. One woman who lived nearby stopped and told us she had passed that building many times and always got creepy feelings from it. That didn't exactly calm my nerves. Then we turned on the spirit box. We took turns asking questions. We asked if anything there remembered us from the last time, since we had said we would come back. At first, there wasn't much. Just static, fragments, nothing clear. Then we heard one word: leave. It was clear enough that both of us understood it. So we listened. We backed away respectfully and moved to the building next door, where we found a set of stairs tucked into a more private spot. We tried again there with the spirit box and EMF readers, but for a while, we barely got anything. Then Lena asked if the spirits felt safe around us. That was when the EMF reader jumped hard into orange and red. It didn't just flicker either. It stayed there for several seconds, long enough that both of us went quiet. Lena said gently, "We're not here to hurt you." And through the spirit box we heard, "Good." That changed the whole feeling of the session. Lena kept asking questions, and from what we could gather, there were several spirits around us. That was when we realized we were sitting outside what seemed to be an abandoned church. After a little more back and forth, the meter finally settled down. We thanked them, set our boundaries, and left. On the drive home, we wandered around a little, just enjoying the night and keeping an eye out for possible places to visit another time. But by then, Lena was already saying she felt exhausted. Not just tired, but drained, like communicating had taken something out of her. When we got home, our cat was not acting normal. Usually she comes right up to greet us, but when we walked in, she was sitting in the exact same spot where we had left her. Lena greeted her sweetly, and we sat down to talk through the night. Then Lena looked at her and said, "Why is she crouched like that? She looks scared." I brushed it off at first. I figured she was fine. Then our cat came over to me and started sniffing my legs. Not just a quick sniff either. She kept circling me, trying to burrow into my shorts, which is something she usually only does with blankets when she's cold. At first, we laughed because it seemed strange but harmless. Then she went to Lena. She sniffed her all over, for a long time. She tried more than once to push her way up Lena's pant legs. She circled her again and again, lightly touching her with her paws, like she was checking her for something. That was when the mood in the room changed. It stopped being funny. After that, the cat went into the laundry basket and investigated it, then jumped up onto the bedside table and stood there like she was keeping watch. Lena gave her treats, and we both fed her, trying to calm her down and reconnect with her. Eventually, she softened and went to her usual spot to curl up. But Lena still looked completely worn out. Then she told me something she hadn't mentioned earlier. She said that when we first got home, she had seen a dark mass in the bathroom, but she hadn't wanted to scare me. That was enough for me. I prayed, reset the boundaries in our home, and made it very clear that nothing was welcome there. Lena was shaken. I comforted her as best I could, and after a while she seemed a little better, though still on edge. Honestly, I was too. Later, when we were in bed, I asked her if all of this was becoming too much. She said no. She still enjoyed it. But we both agreed that if we keep doing this, we need to be more careful. We can't bring anything angry or heavy back with us. I reminded her of the energy we once felt in the boiler room at Jerome High School. That thick, intense feeling that told us not to push further. We agreed on that as our line. If we ever feel energy like that again, we don't challenge it. We walk away. I was driving home from my friend's place one night, and she lives about 45 minutes away from me. By the time this happened, I was probably 12 or 15 minutes from home. It was one of those back roads I know really well because I drive it every few days, and normally I know I have service there. That's important, because this wasn't some dead zone in the middle of nowhere. But that night, it was almost completely black outside. No street lights, no porch lights, nothing. I think there were maybe 1 or 2 houses set back from the road, but I honestly couldn't tell because everything was so dark. I'd been on the phone with my mom for maybe 20 minutes while I was driving. We were just talking like normal, and then I saw something in the road. It was a big red puddle. And I mean red. Not dark like oil, not brownish, not something I could easily brush off. My first thought was, that looks like blood. I slowed down a little, but not enough to really see what it was. It was around 10:30 at night, and the road was so dark that my headlights were the only thing giving me any kind of view. There was a lot of it too. Enough that I started worrying maybe an animal had been hit, or something worse had happened. So I decided to turn around and check, just to make sure. Nobody was on the road anyway. You barely see cars there even during the day. A little past the spot, I pulled into a driveway so I could turn around. The second I finished turning the car, the call with my mom dropped. It just said, "Call failed." I remember staring at the screen for a second, confused, because that didn't make sense. I had just been talking to her with no problem. So I started driving slowly back toward the red spot and tried calling her again. Call failed. I tried one more time. Call failed. Then, on the third try, right as the phone said, "Call failed" again, my car just stopped. Not stalled in a normal way. It just died. I looked down at the dashboard, and suddenly all these lights were on. Battery light, oil light, engine light, turn signal indicators. Before that moment, none of them had been on. The car had been driving perfectly fine. I tried starting it again, but it wouldn't start. So I put it in park and just sat there. And through the windshield, with my headlights still shining, I could see that red splash in the road right in front of me. I'm telling you, it did not look like oil. It looked like blood. And I couldn't see an animal anywhere. Nothing on the shoulder, nothing in the road, nothing nearby that explained it. At that point, I was really starting to get scared. I tried calling my mom again. Call failed. I tried calling my dad. Call failed. Then I called my friend, the one whose house I had just left. Her name is Lila, and somehow she picked up before it even fully rang. I said, "My calls to my mom aren't going through. Can you please call her and tell her to check my location? I'm having car trouble." She didn't even ask questions. She just hung up and called my mom for me. So I'm sitting there in this dead car on this pitch black road right in front of this strange red puddle, waiting for something to happen. My phone won't call my parents. My car won't start. My location should be working, but everything feels wrong. And the weirdest part is that Lila's call was the only one that worked. Then my mom called me. And the second I answered, my car turned on by itself. I didn't touch anything. I didn't turn the key again. It just started. The call came through, the dashboard lights went off, and the car was suddenly acting completely normal. I told my mom, "Never mind, the car's working now." But I was still shaking. I stayed on the phone with her while I pulled forward, turned around again, and headed home. She told me she was watching my location the whole time. We use Life 360, and usually when I'm on my phone, it updates pretty accurately. It even said it had updated just now. But she said my location stayed frozen at that exact spot until I got home. I still don't know what happened. I don't know what that red puddle was. I don't know why my calls failed, why my car died right there, why my friend's call worked, or why everything started working again the second my mom got through. Maybe it was electrical interference. Maybe it was some strange glitch. Maybe there's a normal explanation somewhere. But honestly, I've driven that road plenty of times, and nothing like that has ever happened before.